The atmosphere inside the cockpit of the VX-9 prototype smelled like burning ozone and stale sweat. Captain Jace Rowan fought the stick, his knuckles white inside his reinforced gloves, as the ship bucked against the grav shear of the gas giant below. The planet, a swirling monstrosity of violent violet and bruised orange storms, filled the entire viewport, threatening to drag the experimental fighter down into its crushing depths. "Steady," Jace whispered to himself. He ignored the screaming alarms bathing the cockpit in crimson light. He ignored the structural integrity warnings flashing across his retina display. With a grit of his teeth that made his jaw ache, he slammed the thrusters into a reverse burn. The ship shuddered, a metallic groan vibrating through the hull and into his spine, before it finally broke the gravity well's hold. The VX-9 shot upward, tearing through the upper atmosphere and bursting into the star-speckled blackness of open space. Jace exhaled, a long, ragged breath that fogged the inside of his helmet. He banked the fighter toward the massive orbital dry dock that hung against the backdrop of the nebula like a skeletal leviathan. The United Earth Coalition carrier Aegis waited for him, its landing bay doors yawning open. As he brought the ship in for a landing, the landing gear deployed with a heavy clank, the magnetic locks engaged, and Jace powered down the screaming engines. The silence that followed was deafening. He popped the seal on the canopy and climbed out, jumping the last few feet to the metal grating of the hangar deck. A mechanic with grease-stained coveralls rushed over, checking the scorched heat shielding on the fighter's nose. "You pushed her past the red line again." "Captain," the chief mechanic grumbled, wiping his hands on a rag. "One of these days you are going to turn yourself into a smear of carbon. Better me than some rookie fresh out of the academy," Jace replied, pulling off his helmet and shaking out his dark, sweat-dampened hair. He ran a hand over the scar that jagged across his left cheek, a souvenir from the siege of Sector 7. Besides, the stabilizers held. "Tell the brass the bird is ready for mass production. I am done testing it." He did not wait for a response. He walked across the busy hangar deck, dodging hoverlifts carrying ammunition crates and ignoring the salutes of younger pilots who looked at him with a mixture of awe and pity. Jace Rowan was a legend, but in the Coalition Navy, legends were just ghosts who had not died yet. A rigid lieutenant intercepted him before he could reach the showers. "Captain Rowan, command deck, immediately." Jace stopped, shifting his helmet to his other hip. "I just pulled 6 Gs for 2 hours. Lieutenant, I smell like a locker room and I have not eaten since yesterday." "Priority Alpha," the lieutenant said, his face impassive. "Admiral Vance is waiting. And the Sarathi delegation." Jace froze. The Sarathi, the alien empire that humanity had been in a cold war with for 50 years. A ceasefire had been signed 3 months ago, but it was thinner than the hull plating on a budget freighter. If the Sarathi were on the Aegis, something massive was happening. "Another suicide mission," Jace muttered, mostly to himself. He followed the lieutenant through the labyrinthine corridors of the carrier. The air grew cooler and cleaner as they ascended to the command levels. The utilitarian gray steel of the lower decks gave way to polished polymer floors and soft lighting. They reached the briefing chamber. 2 heavily armored Marines stood guard. The doors hissed open, and Jace stepped inside. The room was vast, dominated by a circular holographic table displaying the contested border sectors. Standing on one side was Admiral Vance, a man whose dress uniform was so crisp it looked like it could cut glass. On the other side stood 3 figures that made the hair on the back of Jace's neck stand up. Sarathi. They were tall, elegant, and unnerving. Their skin was pale violet, shimmering with a faint, bioluminescent sheen. They wore flowing robes of living weave that seemed to ripple without wind. Their eyes were large, solid pools of black with shifting galaxies of light deep within them. "Captain Rowan," Admiral Vance said, his voice booming with forced conviviality. "Thank you for joining us." Jace stood at attention but did not salute. "Admiral, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Vance gestured to the lead alien, a female with high cheekbones and an expression of imperious boredom. "This is High Envoy Karis of the Sarathi Empire. We are discussing the final terms of the Armistice Treaty." Jace looked at the envoy. "I am a pilot, Admiral. I fly things and I blow things up. I do not do diplomacy." "You do today," Vance said, his smile tightening. "The Sarathi High Council has proposed a traditional binding to seal the peace, a cultural exchange of the highest order, a union between our two species." Jace narrowed his eyes. "A union? You mean a marriage?" "Precisely." Envoy Karis spoke, her voice sounding like chimes vibrating in deep water. "A peace bond, to ensure that our bloodlines mix and our futures are entwined. My empress has offered her daughter, the Princess Lyrae, as the bride." Jace crossed his arms. "Congratulations to the lucky groom. Who is the poor bastard?" Vance cleared his throat, adjusting his collar. "We needed a representative who embodies the best of humanity. A war hero, someone with a public profile, genetic compatibility, and the tactical fortitude to handle the pressures of the Sarathi court." The silence stretched. Jace looked from the admiral to the envoy, and then he pointed a gloved finger at his own chest. "No," Jace said flatly. "It is an order, Captain," Vance snapped, dropping the facade. "It is insanity," Jace shot back. "I am a soldier, not a diplomat. I am definitely not a husband. Find some politician and find a volunteer." "We have run the simulations," Karis said, stepping closer. Her strange eyes bore into him. "You are the only candidate who satisfies our criteria for genetic resilience. The others would not survive the transition to our atmosphere and customs." Jace laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Genetic resilience. Is that what we are calling it? Look, I have done my time. I have flown missions that would make your sensors bleed. I am not getting married to some alien royal to sell headlines." Vance leaned over the table. "This is not about headlines. Rowan, it is about preventing total annihilation. The peace talks are stalling. Factions on both sides want to resume the war. This marriage is the only thing keeping the Armada from glassing the outer colonies." Jace clenched his jaw. The outer colonies. That was where the veterans retired, where the refugees from the First War lived. "If you refuse," Vance said softly, "the ceasefire collapses within 48 hours. The Sarathi will take it as an insult. The shelling starts on the border worlds. Millions of lives. Jace, including the retirement moons where your old squadron lives. It was a trap. A perfect political trap." Jace looked at the envoy, who refused to meet his gaze, staring instead at the holographic map. There was something they were not saying, a tension in the way the envoy's fingers twitched against her robes. "Fine," Jace growled, the word tasting like ash. "I will do it, but not for you. Vance, excellent." Vance beamed, clapping his hands. "You will be a symbol. Rowan, a hero of peace." Jace turned and walked out before he punched a superior officer. 20 minutes later, Jace sat in his quarters, staring at a bottle of synthetic whiskey. The door chimed, and Kira, his wingman and only real friend on the ship, breezed in. "So," she said, leaning against the bulkhead with a smirk, "I hear congratulations are in order. Prince Charming." "Shut up, Kira," Jace muttered, pouring a drink. Hey, look on the bright side, she said, sitting opposite him. You get a palace. You get a princess. Most guys retire and get a pension and a bad back. You are marrying royalty. Have you looked her up yet? No, Jace said, and I do not want to. Well, I did, Kira said, and her voice lost its teasing edge. She tapped her wrist display, projecting a holographic screen between them. And Jace, you need to see this. Jace glanced up. The screen showed a grainy image of a Sarathi woman, her face partially obscured by a veil of light. Beneath the image, text scrolled rapidly and read, Princess Lyre. Kira read aloud. Third in line for the throne. Known in the Sarathi data nets as the Void Touched, or more commonly, the Cursed Bride. Cursed, Jace asked, taking a sip of the burning liquid. Listen to this, Kira continued, her brow furrowed. She has been betrothed 3 times. The first groom, a Sarathi duke, died of a brain aneurysm during the rehearsal dinner. The second, a planetary governor, vanished from a locked room the night before the wedding. The third went mad and drove his shuttle into a sun. Coincidence, Jace said, though a cold knot formed in his stomach. There is more, Kira said. Every ship she travels on suffers critical system failures. Entire squadrons have been wiped out in anomalies after she visits their bases. Rumor says she dreams and fleets fall. Jace, they are not sending you to get married. They are sending you to get removed. Jace stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He paced the small room. The Admiral's words echoed in his mind. Genetic resilience, bad luck streak. They know, Jace realized. Vance knows. He is banking on the fact that I am too stubborn to die. Or he is banking on the fact that you will, Kira said quietly. Jace, you can run. Take a shuttle. I will clear your flight path and let the colonies burn. Jace shook his head. No. If this princess is a monster, I will deal with her. I have handled worse things than bad luck. The journey to the Sarathi capital world, Xylos, took 3 days in hyperspace, when the human diplomatic cruiser reverted to real space. Jace looked out the viewport and felt his breath catch. Xylos was not like Earth. It was a jewel of bioluminescence hanging in the velvet dark. The planet was covered in vast glowing oceans that shifted from teal to deep indigo. There were no continents, only massive floating archipelagos of crystal and coral that drifted on the tides. The cities were spires of living glass, reaching up toward the twin moons that orbited in a tight dance. The shuttle descent was smooth, too smooth. Jace, dressed in a stiff ceremonial white uniform that felt like a straitjacket, watched the capital city rise to meet them. It was beautiful, but it was a cold, alien beauty. The architecture looked grown rather than built, spiraling towers that hummed with a low-frequency vibration he could feel in his teeth. They landed on a suspended platform high above the glowing waves. As the ramp lowered, the sound of thousands of voices chanting washed over him. Drones hovered everywhere, their camera lenses gleaming like insect eyes. Banners made of hard light rippled in the breeze, displaying the crest of the Sarathi Empire intertwined with the coalition symbol. Smile. Captain, the protocol droid whispered in his ear. The galaxy is watching. Jace stepped out. The air tasted sweet, heavy with ozone and unfamiliar pollen. A procession of Sarathi guards, armed with energy pikes, formed an aisle. At the end of the platform stood the palace entrance, a gaping maw of pearl and iridescent metal. He walked the gauntlet. He saw human faces in the crowd, diplomats, reporters looking anxious. He saw Sarathi faces looking hostile. There was no joy here. This was a surrender ceremony disguised as a wedding. He was escorted deep into the palace. The corridors were silent, lined with murals that moved slightly as he passed. He stopped before one. It depicted a royal couple from centuries ago. The king was clear, majestic, the queen. Her face was blurred by a patch of static, a digital scar on the artwork. He checked the next mural. Same thing. The queen's face was distorted. "Why are they glitching?" Jace asked his escort, a towering Sarathi guard. "They are not glitching," the guard rumbled. "The system rejects the image of the cursed ones. Do not stare. Human. It attracts the bad fortune." Jace straightened his jacket. Great. They arrived at the Chamber of Tides. The doors dissolved into mist, and Jace walked in. The room was circular, the floor made of transparency steel looking down into the glowing depths of the ocean miles below. In the center of the room, staring out at the water, stood a figure. She turned as he entered. Princess Lyrae was taller than him, slender but with a coiled strength that reminded him of a viper. Her skin was the color of moonlight, patterned with faint, shifting bioluminescent markings that swirled like constellations across her arms and neck. Her hair was a cascade of liquid silver, braided with living vines of biotech that pulsed with a soft blue rhythm. But it was her eyes that held him. They were twin nebulae, swirling with violet and gold, vast and terrifyingly deep. She looked him up and down, her expression unreadable. "So," she said. Her voice was low, melodic, but sharp as a scalpel. "You are the offering, Captain Jace Rowan," he corrected, stepping forward. "And I prefer the term volunteer." She laughed, a short, humorless sound. "No one volunteers for this. Captain. They are either forced or they are fools. Which are you?" "A bit of both, probably," Jace said. He tried to relax his posture, falling back on the defensive sarcasm that had kept him sane during the war. "I heard rumors you were dangerous. I was hoping the curse would not kill me before dessert. I have a metabolism to maintain." Lyrae's face froze. The markings on her skin flared a brighter blue, then dimmed rapidly. "You think this is a joke?" she asked softly. "I think this whole situation is a joke, Princess. I am just the punchline." She stepped closer, invading his personal space. She did not smell like perfume. She smelled like static electricity and crushed flowers. She sniffed him, her nose wrinkling slightly. "And you," she said, tilting her head. "You smell of engine grease and rain." Not what I expected in a sacrificial groom. I expected cologne and fear. "I am fresh out of cologne," Jace said, holding her gaze. A spark of surprise flickered in her eyes. Most people looked away from her. He did not. The doors opened, and a flock of attendants and protocol officials rushed in, shattering the moment. It was time for the rehearsal. For the next 2 hours, they were moved like dolls. "Stand here. Hold hands here. Recite this." When they were told to clasp hands, Jace felt a shock, like touching a live wire. Lyrae flinched, pulling back slightly, but the instructors barked at them to maintain contact. During a break, the attendants withdrew to argue about camera angles. Jace leaned against a pillar, watching Lyrae. She stood apart from everyone, her back rigid. She was rubbing her left wrist over and over. A glowing mark there pulsed erratically. He moved closer, silent on his boots. "Does it hurt?" he asked. Lyrae jumped, turning to face him, but she quickly covered her wrist. "That is none of your concern. I am just asking," Jace said. "It is just interference," she murmured, looking at the floor. Then, her voice dropped to a whisper, so low he almost missed it. "I do not want another stranger to die because of me. Captain, you should have run when you had the chance. Jace looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers trembled. You believe it, he realized. You believe you are cursed. It is not a matter of belief, she snapped, her eyes flashing. It is empirical data. Everyone who stands where you are standing ends up dead. Jace shrugged. I have made a career out of beating the odds. You are arrogant, she said, but there was no heat in it, just sadness. Maybe, Jace said. Or maybe I just do not believe in ghosts. The night before the wedding, Jace could not sleep. His quarters in the guest wing of the palace were opulent, filled with floating furniture and silk drapes, but he felt exposed. He sat on the edge of the bed, stripping down his service pistol. He had smuggled it in his boot. Protocol prohibited weapons, but Jace Rowan never went anywhere unarmed. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room. Jace moved on instinct. He rolled off the bed, bringing the pistol up, but the intruder was fast. A hand encased in kinetic armor slapped the gun away. Jace drove a shoulder into the attacker's midsection, tackling them to the floor. They crashed into a glass table, shattering it. The intruder was strong, Sarathi strong, but Jace fought dirty. He jammed an elbow into a pressure point on the attacker's neck and swept their legs. He pinned the figure to the ground, his forearm against their throat. Who sent you? Jace snarled. The intruder stopped struggling. They wore matte black stealth armor. On the chest piece, a faint sigil glowed, a broken circle. Not the imperial crest. Dissidents. You are walking into a grave. Human, the intruder rasped, their voice distorted by a modulator. Is that a threat? Jace tightened his grip. It is a warning. The intruder choked out. The marriage is a trap. For you, and for her. The bond will kill you both. Before Jace could ask more, the intruder's armor shimmered. Distortion tech. Jace felt the solid mass beneath him turn to smoke. He grabbed at empty air. The intruder rematerialized by the balcony doors. Leave, or burn, the intruder shouted, and then vaulted over the railing, vanishing into the neon night. Jace stood up, breathing hard. He looked at his hands. A trap for both of them. The wedding day dawned with a sky the color of bruised peaches. The palace was transformed. Floating lanterns drifted like jellyfish through the air. Platforms of transparent glass hovered over the ocean, arranged in a massive amphitheater. Millions of Sarathi and humans watched from the stands and through trillions of screens across the galaxy. Jace stood at the altar, a suspended ring of living crystal that hummed with a deep, resonant tone. He wore a heavy ceremonial robe over his dress uniform. He felt ridiculous, and he felt like a target. Music erupted, a thundering blast of alien horns that vibrated in his chest. Lyrae appeared at the far end of the platform. She was breathtaking and terrifying. She wore a gown of woven light that seemed to be burning off her skin. Her hair was loose, floating around her head in a zero-gravity halo. But her face was pale, and the bioluminescent markings on her skin were moving frantically, jagged spikes of light that betrayed her fear. She walked toward him. Every step looked like it cost her something. She reached the ring. The crystal beneath their feet flared red, then settled into a steady, pulsing white. The crowd murmured, "The curse." They whispered, "Watch for the surge." Lyrae stepped up to him. Her hands were shaking. She looked at him, and for a second, the mask of the princess slipped. She looked like a woman facing a firing squad. "Do not let go," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chanting of the high priest. "I have got you," Jace said. The priest, a withered Sarathi with eyes like clouded marbles, raised his staff. He began the recitation of the bond. It was long, archaic, and spoke of merging souls and quantum entanglements. Jace tuned it out, He scanned the crowd. He saw Vance, looking smug. He saw the envoy, looking tense. He saw the perimeter guards, their hands too close to their weapons. "Now," the priest intoned. "Speak the vows of acceptance." Lyrae spoke first. Her voice trembled but grew stronger. "I accept this bond. I offer my life for the peace of two worlds." The ring hummed louder. The air pressure dropped. Static electricity made Jace's hair stand on end. Jace took her hands. They were cold. He looked at the cameras, then back at her. He was supposed to say, "I accept this bond and pledge my loyalty to the Empire." Jace took a breath. He looked at this woman, this monster who was terrified of hurting him, this creature of light and sorrow who hid a sharp wit behind a wall of ice. "They forced me to marry the cursed alien princess," Jace muttered, low enough that the microphones barely caught it. Lyrae's eyes widened. "What?" Jace squeezed her hands. He gave her a crooked, reckless grin, the one he wore right before diving into a dogfight he could not win. "But," he added, his voice dropping to an amused, intimate rumble, "you are turning out to be exactly my type." Lyrae stared at him. Shock rippled through her. A flush of pink and gold light exploded under her skin, racing up her neck to her cheeks. She looked, for the first time, not like a symbol, but like a girl who had just been surprised. The bonding seal activated. A beam of pure energy shot up from the crystal ring, enveloping them. And then the world ended. A massive boom shattered the air. The main power grid of the palace surged, blindingly bright. A section of the viewing platform to their right sheared off, metal screaming as it twisted. Explosions detonated along the outer rim of the wedding ring. Screams erupted from the crowd. Sabotage alarms blared, a discordant shriek against the wedding music. Jace didn't think. He reacted. "Get down!" he roared. He tackled Lyrae, slamming her to the crystal floor just as a force field generator overhead exploded, showering them with sparks and debris. The platform beneath them lurched violently, tilting 45 degrees. Jace dug his boots into a groove in the crystal, holding Lyrae against his chest with one arm, shielding her head with the other. Debris rained down around them. Smoke filled the air. The pristine wedding was gone, replaced by a kill box. Lyrae looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. Her skin was glowing so bright it was hard to look at. "The curse!" she cried, her voice cracking. "It is happening!" Jace looked at the chaos, the calculated demolition, the precision of the charges. This wasn't magic. This was military-grade ordnance. "That is not a curse." "Princess," Jace shouted over the roar of collapsing structural beams. "That is a hit!" The platform gave another violent shudder, groaning as the anti-grav suspensors failed. They were sliding toward the edge, toward the mile-long drop to the ocean below. "Hang on!" Jace yelled, gripping her tighter as the world fell apart around them. Smoke still drifted across the shattered remains of the wedding platform, a dark smear against the pristine violet sky of Xylos. The air was thick with the screech of emergency sirens and the buzzing of repair drones that swarmed over the wreckage like angry metallic hornets. Security forces, a mix of Sarathi royal guards in iridescent armor and grim-faced human marines, established a perimeter, shouting orders that clashed in the chaotic atmosphere. Captain Jace Rowan did not hear any of it. The roar of the explosion had been replaced by a heavy, muffled silence, the kind that came with heavy sedation. He floated in and out of consciousness. He felt cold, then hot. He felt the sensation of 1,000 tiny, wet fingers stitching his skin back together. When he finally opened his eyes, the world was a blur of soft, pulsating blue light. He blinked, trying to clear the fog from his brain. He was lying on a floating medical slab inside a chamber made of translucent crystal. Above him, a web of viscous, glowing fluid, Sarathi biogel, was retracting from his chest and arm, dissolving into the air as its work was finished. Jace sat up, gasping as his ribs protested. They felt stiff, but whole. He ran a hand over his side. No blood, no scars, just new, pink skin where shrapnel had torn into him only hours ago. "You should not move so quickly," a voice said. It was cool, detached, and utterly devoid of warmth. Jace turned his head. Princess Lyre sat in a floating chair near the wall. She had changed out of her ruined wedding gown into a simple, severe tunic of dark gray weave. Her hair was pulled back tightly, exposing the curve of her neck where the bioluminescent markings pulsed with a slow, rhythmic dullness. She looked like a statue carved from ice and regret. "I have had worse hangovers," Jace croaked. He swung his legs over the side of the slab, testing his weight. "What happened?" "Official channels are calling it a terrorist strike by a radical anti-peace faction," Lyre said, staring at her hands, which were folded perfectly in her lap. "But the whispers in the corridors tell a different story. They say the cursed bride has awakened. They say my energy field destabilized the reactor core of the platform." She looked up at him then, her eyes dark and hollow. "It is what I have been told my whole life. Captain, my presence causes entropy. Chaos. I destabilized the energy grid, and that allowed the shields to fail." Jace frowned, shaking the last of the dizziness away. He remembered the precision of the charges. He remembered the way the support beams had sheared. "That was not entropy." "Princess," Jace said, his voice firm, "that was demolition. Someone planted those charges. Unless your curse knows how to wire high-grade explosives to a structural load-bearing point, you are not to blame." Lyre did not seem to hear him. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and frustration. "You were right to be afraid. My energy field reacts to fluctuations. My distress caused the surge. If you stay near me, the probability of fatal accidents increases by 80%. You nearly died today." Jace watched her carefully. Her posture was rigid, regal, the perfect picture of an aloof alien royal. But he looked closer. He saw the way her knuckles were white from gripping her own fingers. He saw the microscopic tremor in her lower lip. She was terrified. She was waiting for him to run, to scream, to blame her like everyone else had. He decided to pivot. "Well," Jace said, rubbing the back of his neck and wincing theatrically, "if your curse wanted me dead, it really should have picked a less stubborn target. I have survived crash landings, vacuum exposure, and cafeteria meatloaf on a budget cruiser. A falling wedding venue is going to have to try harder than that." Lyre stared at him. For a second, the silence stretched taut. Then she let out a sound that was half snort, half gasp. It was unladylike and sudden. She clamped a hand over her mouth, her eyes widening as if she had just betrayed a state secret. "Did you just snort?" Jace asked, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I did not," Lyre said quickly, regaining her composure, though the blue markings on her neck flared a bright, embarrassed teal. "Sarathi royalty do not snort. It was a respiratory fluctuation." "Right," Jace said, sliding off the table and standing on his own 2 feet. "A fluctuation. Let us go with that." Before they could continue, the door to the medical bay hissed open. Admiral Vance marched in, followed by High Priest Valen, the clouded-eyed Sarathi who had officiated the ceremony. The air in the room instantly grew heavy with political tension. "Captain," Vance barked, looking Jace over with a critical eye. "Good to see you are mobile. We have a situation. The Royal Council is in uproar, Valen said, his voice like dry leaves scraping together. The elders are demanding the annulment of the bond. They claim the princess is too dangerous to be near a human. They fear your biological signature is incompatible with her condition. They want to ship you back to the fleet. Rowan, Vance translated bluntly. For your own safety. And let the alliance crumble? Jace asked, leaning against the crystal wall and crossing his arms. If I leave now, the Sarathi hardliners will say humanity is weak. They will say we fled at the first sign of trouble. The war starts again by tomorrow morning. Vance nodded, looking grim. Exactly. The moderate factions are holding the line, but barely. We cannot break the marriage, but we cannot ignore the security risk. So, what is the compromise? Lyrae asked, her voice steel. Quarantine, Valen said. You and the captain will be housed in the Sapphire Wing. It is isolated from the main palace grid. You will remain there until the energy fluctuations stabilize. And, Vance added, raising a finger, there are strict protocols. You are to be monitored 24 hours a day. Sensors, drones, bioscanners, and absolutely no physical intimacy. Jace raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? High-stress emotional or physical contact seems to trigger the princess's anomaly, Vance said, avoiding eye contact. We cannot risk another surge. You are to be roommates, Captain, nothing more. You are the symbol of the marriage, but for God's sake, keep your hands to yourself. Lyrae looked away, her expression freezing over again. Fine, Jace said, breaking the awkward silence. I prefer my own bunk anyway. When do we move in? The Sapphire Wing was less of a prison and more of a gilded cage. It was a sprawling suite of rooms located on a high spire, disconnected from the rest of the floating city by a long, transparent bridge. The walls were floor-to-ceiling transparency steel, offering a panoramic view of the bioluminescent ocean and the wreckage of the wedding platform below, a constant reminder of their disaster. It was luxurious, beautiful, and completely infested with surveillance. Small, spherical drones hovered in the corners of the ceiling, their red optical sensors tracking every movement. Biometric scanners hummed in the door frames. Even the air felt monitored. The main bedroom was dominated by a massive bed carved from a single piece of shimmering, semi-translucent crystal. It looked beautiful, and about as comfortable as a slab of ice. There is one bed, Jace noted dryly, standing in the doorway with his meager bag of belongings. Lyrae swept past him, her head held high. It is a traditional resting platform. It aligns with the magnetic fields of the planet to promote regeneration. It looks like a glorified rock, Jace said. He scanned the room and pointed to a small, recessed alcove near the window. It had a narrow, padded bench intended for meditation. That. I will take that. Lyrae turned, confused. That is a servant's nook. It is not fit for a husband. It is soft, and it is far away from the cameras pointed at the bed. Jace said. He tossed his bag onto the bench and bowed with exaggerated flourish. The honor of being the cursed princess's roommate is all mine, Your Highness. But I draw the line at sleeping on a geology exhibit. Lyrae rolled her eyes, but the tension in her shoulders dropped an inch. Suit yourself, human. But be warned, if you snore, I will have the security drone stun you. I do not snore. Jace lied. He did snore. Lyrae found this out 3 hours later. The first 2 days in the Sapphire Wing were a study in awkward cohabitation. They were two strangers from warring species locked in a fishbowl, circling each other with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Jace quickly discovered that Sarathi technology was frustratingly organic. The wardrobe in the dressing chamber was not a closet. It was a living symbiont colony that sensed the user's need for clothing. Jace stood in front of the writhing mass of silk and bioweave. "I just want a jacket," he told the wall. "A normal human jacket. 2 sleeves, a collar, no tentacles." The wardrobe rippled and spat out a flowing, floor-length robe of iridescent purple that looked like something a wizard would wear to a disco. Jace sighed. Lyrae walked in, holding a cup of steaming nutrient nectar. She stopped, eyeing the robe in his hands. "It thinks you wish to display your plumage. It is sensing your latent aggression and trying to make you look formidable." "I look like a grape," Jace muttered, tossing the robe back. The wall swallowed it with a slurping sound. "You are struggling with the interface," Lyrae noted, a hint of amusement in her voice. "You have to project the image of what you want into the neural sensor." "I am a pilot," Jace said. "I push buttons, I flip switches. I do not telepathically negotiate with my laundry." While Jace fought with the furniture, Lyrae found herself equally baffled by his habits. She walked into the main lounge one afternoon to find Jace sitting on the floor, surrounded by the disassembled remains of a cleaning drone. Panels were pried open, wires were splayed out, and gears were scattered across the polished floor. "What are you doing?" Lyrae asked, horrified. "That unit is worth more than your shuttle." "I was bored," Jace said, holding a microdriver in his teeth, "and it had a rattle in the drivetrain. It was driving me crazy. Besides, these servos are misaligned. Whoever maintains your tech relies too much on the self-repair protocols and not enough on basic mechanics." He snapped a casing back into place and tapped the drone. It whirred to life, hovering silently and smoothly. The rattle gone. Lyrae stared at the drone, then at him. "You fixed it. I am an engineer. Princess, I fix things." Jace wiped grease on his pants, civilian trousers he had finally wrestled from the wardrobe. Lyrae watched him. In the Sarathi court, men were poets, politicians or warriors who viewed manual labor as beneath them. She had never seen a man who found comfort in the guts of a machine. It was strange. It was grounding. On the 3rd evening, they were summoned to a diplomatic reception in the Grand Spire. The council insisted. Appearances had to be maintained. The galaxy needed to see the happy couple. Jace dressed in his dress blues, the medals on his chest gleaming under the harsh palace lights. He felt like an imposter. When Lyrae stepped out of her dressing room, Jace forgot how to breathe for a solid 3 seconds. She wore a ceremonial gown of deep midnight blue that seemed to be woven from shadows. The front was high-collared and severe, but when she turned, the back was entirely open, held together by an intricate harness of silver chains. Her skin was on full display. The bioluminescent markings, swirls of teal and violet, glowed against the dark room. They traced the line of her spine, curling around her shoulder blades in patterns that were hypnotic. Jace stared. He knew he should look away. He was a professional, damn it. But his eyes traced the path of the light down her back. His pulse hammered a traitorous rhythm against his collar. "Do I have a malfunction?" Lyrae asked, turning to look at him over her shoulder. "You are staring." "No," Jace said, his voice jumping an octave. "No malfunction. Just structural integrity check. You look strategic." "Strategic?" Lyrae raised an eyebrow. "Impressive," Jace corrected, clearing his throat. "Let us go. The sharks are waiting." The reception was a nightmare of forced smiles and hushed whispers. The ballroom was filled with hundreds of dignitaries, hovering trays of drinks and music that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Jace stuck to Lyray's side like a bodyguard. He noticed the way the crowd parted around her, leaving a wide circle of empty space. No one wanted to get too close to the cursed bride. He saw the loneliness in her eyes, the way she held her chin high to hide the hurt. He hated them for it. He leaned in close, whispering in her ear, "If that guy in the red hat stares at you one more time, I am going to spill my drink on him." Accidentally, of course. Lyrae glanced at him, surprised. "That is the Archduke of Kale. He controls the helium mines. I do not care if he controls the sun," Jace muttered. "He is looking at you like you are a bomb about to go off." "I am a bomb," Lyrae whispered back. "You are my wife," Jace said. The words slipped out before he could check them. Lyrae froze. She looked at him, and for a moment, the diplomatic mask vanished. Her eyes searched his, looking for the lie. She smiled, a genuine small smile that lit up her face more than the bioluminescence ever could. Jace felt his palms sweat. He went to grab a drink from a hovering tray to busy his hands, but his coordination failed him. He fumbled the glass, knocking the entire tray sideways. Gravity bubbles burst. Blue liquid splashed onto his polished boots. Smooth. Rowan. He cursed himself. Lyrae laughed softly, a sound like a silver bell. Then the lights flickered. It was subtle at first, a dip in the ambient glow. Then, the massive shield wall that protected the ballroom from the open night sky shuddered. A hole melted through the energy field, high up near the vaulted ceiling. A swarm of black specks poured through. Drone mites. Assassination tech. "Get down!" Jace shouted, his combat instincts taking over. The swarm descended like a cloud of locusts, heading straight for Lyrae. The guests screamed and scrambled. Jace grabbed a heavy ceremonial staff from a nearby guard who was too stunned to move. It was an energy pike. He thumbed the activation switch, the tip crackling with plasma. He swung, batting a cluster of mites out of the air. They exploded in sparks. Lyrae stood her ground. She did not cower. She raised her hands, palms facing the swarm. Her eyes glowed blindingly white. A pulse of raw distortion energy erupted from her. It slammed into the mites, scrambling their guidance system. They rained down onto the floor, twitching and dead. But there were too many. A second wave dove toward them. Jace stepped in front of her, firing a blast from the pike. At the same moment, Lyrae unleashed another wave of energy. His hand brushed hers on the staff. Contact. The world turned white. A shock wave, born from the collision of his biosignature and her quantum field, exploded outward. It was not destructive like the wedding blast. It was precise. It rippled through the room, passing harmlessly through the people but frying every piece of unshielded electronics instantly. The lights blew out. The hovering trays crashed to the floor. The drone mites dropped like stones. Silence fell over the darkened hall, broken only by the whimpering of terrified diplomats. Jace stood in the dark, breathing hard, his hand still covering hers on the staff. He could feel the heat radiating from her. He could feel a hum, a vibration that traveled up his arm and settled in his chest. It felt right. Then the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the room in harsh red. Lyrae yanked her hand away as if burned. She looked at the devastation, the darkened room, the frightened faces. "I did it again," she whispered. "Lyrae." "Wait." Jace started, but she turned and ran, her ceremonial gown sweeping behind her as she fled the hall. Jace found her an hour later. She had locked herself in the meditation chamber back in their suite. The door was sealed with a biometric lock. Jace did not have the code. He did have a micro-welder he had swiped from the maintenance closet earlier while fixing the drone. He cut the lock. The door slid open with a protest. The room was dark, lit only by the frantic, pulsing light of Liray's skin. She was huddled in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, rocking slightly. The markings on her arms were glowing so bright it looked painful, like lava flowing under the surface. "Go away," she rasped, not looking up. "I am dangerous. The council was right. I am a weapon." Jace holstered the welder and walked over. He did not leave. He sat down on the floor, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her, but careful not to touch. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell you what? Tell me what this is, because I know demolition and I know combat, and I know what we just did in that hall. That was not a curse. Liray, that was a defense mechanism." Liray lifted her head. Tears shimmered in her nebula eyes. "When I was 6, she began, her voice trembling. My father, the Emperor, was obsessed with the prophecy of the void. He wanted to secure the bloodline. He authorized the Science Directorate to enhance me." Jace felt a cold fury settle in his gut. "Enhance you?" "They tried to bind a quantum symbiont to my nervous system," she said. "A living field of probability and energy harvested from the event horizon of a black hole. It was supposed to make me a seer, a protector." She looked at her glowing hands. The other children in the test group died. Their bodies could not hold the charge. "I survived, but the symbiont, it is volatile. It reacts to my emotions, fear, anger, desire. It twists probability around me. Machines fail. People get hurt. I am a walking error in the laws of physics." Jace listened, his jaw tight. He looked at the scars on his own hands, the reminders of war. He looked at this woman, who had been tortured by her own family in the name of power. "It is not a curse," Jace said, his voice low and fierce. "It is a parasite, and the people who put it there are the monsters. Not you." Liray shook her head. "It does not matter who did it. The result is the same. I hurt people. I am toxic." Jace shifted, leaning closer. He entered her personal space, defying the heat, defying the fear. "You are brave," he said. She laughed bitterly. "Brave? I am hiding in a closet." "You survived," Jace said. "You carried this thing for 20 years and you haven't let it turn you into a killer. You fight it every day. That is the bravest thing I have ever heard." He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her knee. "Curses are fairy tales. Liray, they are stories to scare children. This is just tech, and tech can be understood. It can be controlled." Liray looked at his hand, then up at his face. The frantic pulsing of her skin began to slow. The blinding white light faded to a soft, rhythmic azure. "You really believe that?" she whispered. "I have to." Jace grinned crookedly. "Otherwise, I am just a guy locked in a room with a glowing princess. And that sounds like the start of a bad joke." Liray let out a shaky breath, a half-laugh escaping her. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shuddered. A tremor ran through the ship city, a stabilizer adjustment deep in the palace's core. Liray lost her balance, pitching forward. Jace caught her. His hands gripped her arms, steadying her. Her hands landed on his chest, clutching the lapels of his uniform. They froze. The air in the small chamber thickened instantly. The hum returned, that deep, resonant vibration they had felt in the ballroom. But this time, without the adrenaline of combat, it felt different. It felt electric. Liray's markings flared, not with the jagged spikes of fear, but with a warm, golden fluid light that rippled where Jace touched her. Her eyes widened, the galaxies within them spinning. Jace looked down at her. He could smell the ozone and wildflowers scent of her. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart against his palm. The no-touching rule evaporated from his mind. They were chest to chest, breathing the same air. The energy field wrapped around them, cocooning them in a soft, static warmth. It wasn't repelling him. It was pulling him in. Jace's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. He saw the same hunger there that he felt, a desperation born of loneliness and the sudden, shocking realization that they were not alone anymore. Lyra leaned in, her eyelids fluttering shut. Jace tilted his head, closing the distance. Beep, beep, beep. The shrill alarm sliced through the air like a knife. Energy spike detected. A mechanical voice blared from the ceiling. Initiating containment protocols. 2 security drones zipped into the room, their red eyes flashing, hovering aggressively between them. Lyra jerked back as if she had been slapped. The golden light vanished, replaced by a dull gray shame. She scrambled away from him, pressing her back against the wall. I am sorry, she stammered. The energy. Jace stared at the drones. The moment was shattered. The intimacy was gone, replaced by the cold reality of their cage. Frustration, hot and blinding, welled up in him. "Oh, shut up," Jace roared. He swung a fist and punched the lead drone out of the air. It spiraled across the room and crashed into the wall with a satisfying crunch of metal. The second drone backed off, chirping a warning. Jace stood there, chest heaving, nursing his bruised knuckles. He looked at Lyra. She was trembling again. "They are watching," Jace said, his voice hard. "Even now, they are watching every heartbeat." Lyra nodded, wiping her eyes. We cannot do this. If the Council sees the spikes, they will separate us. They will lock me in the stasis vaults." Jace looked at the broken drone, then at the door. He walked over to Lyra, but this time he stopped a foot away. He lowered his voice to a whisper, barely moving his lips. "Then we give them a show," he said. Lyra looked up. "What?" "We play the part," Jace whispered. "The dutiful, cursed couple. We bicker. We stay apart. We let them think we are scared of the bond." "But," Lyra asked, sensing the edge in his voice. "But in private, we hunt," Jace said. "Someone sabotaged that wedding. Someone sent those mites. Someone is manipulating your symbiont to make it look like a curse." Lyra's eyes narrowed. The fear was receding, replaced by the sharp intellect he had seen at the altar. "You think it is being amplified?" "I know it is," Jace said. "And I am going to find out who has the remote control. Are you with me?" Lyra looked at him. She looked at the man who had punched a drone for her, the man who called her brave. She stood up, smoothing her tunic. The glow on her skin settled into a steady, determined steel blue. "I am with you, Captain," she whispered. Later that night, the two of them stood on the balcony of the Sapphire Wing. The wind whipped at their clothes. Below them, the bioluminescent ocean churned, casting long, dancing shadows against the spire. They stood side by side, bodies angled slightly toward each other, close enough to feel the warmth but not touching. To the cameras, they looked like two people trapped in a tragic, loveless arrangement, staring out at a world that didn't want them. But the air between them crackled with a secret. "We start tomorrow," Jace murmured to the wind. "I will access the drone logs. You get me the schematics for the palace energy grid." "Consider it done," Lyra replied softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. They did not hold hands. They did not kiss. But as they stood there against the galaxy, Jace Rowan knew one thing for certain. The curse was a lie, but the partnership, that was very, very real. The Sapphire Wing was quiet, save for the hum of the ventilation and the rhythmic tapping of Jace's fingers against a holographic keyboard. He was lying on his back under the main communications console of their suite. A panel pried open above him, exposing a nest of crystalline optical fibers. "Hold that line steady," Jace muttered, a micro-torch clamped between his teeth. "The firewall is cycling every 3 seconds. I need a surge on the blue channel. Now." Above him, Lyrae knelt on the polished floor. She placed her fingertips against the exposed data port. She closed her eyes, and the bioluminescent markings on her arms flared from arresting dimness to a sharp, bright azure. She did not need a keyboard. She simply pushed a pulse of her own bioelectric energy into the system, bypassing the hardware limitations that Jace was struggling with. "Got it," Jace said, sliding out from under the console. He sat up, wiping grease from his cheek, and looked at the floating display. "We are in." They were a strange pair, the rough-edged human soldier and the ethereal alien princess, huddled together like thieves in the night. Over the past week, this had become their routine. By day, they played the part of the distant, cursed couple. By night, they dismantled the palace's secrets piece by piece. Jace scrolled through the data streams cascading down the screen. Lyrae leaned over his shoulder, her warmth radiating against his arm. The no-touching rule had become a guideline they both ignored when the work required it, though the tension of accidental brushes still made the air between them crackle. "Here," Jace said, his voice dropping. "Look at this file header. Project Prophet." Lyrae stiffened. "That is the code name from the files the dissident gave you." Jace opened the folder. It was heavily encrypted, but the headers were readable. They were logs dating back 20 years, joint authorization codes. One set belonged to the Sarathi Science Directorate. The other set was Human Coalition Intelligence. "It goes back to before the war," Jace whispered, reading the text. "Before the first shots were fired. Lyrae, look at the subject line. Subject, Void Symbiont Integration. Phase 1. Candidate Lyrae." Lyrae's breath hitched. She reached out, her hand hovering over the projection. "These are the logs from the laboratory. My childhood." Jace kept scrolling. There were schematics of the symbiont, the quantum entity living in her nervous system. But there were also diagrams of external devices. Signal amplifiers, frequency modulators. The text was clinical and cold. Subject demonstrates high probability manipulation. Instability can be induced via remote frequency transmission. Test 7. Remote trigger of localized gravity failure successful. Casualties acceptable. "They triggered it," Lyrae whispered, horror dawning in her voice. "The failures on the ships, the accidents, the men who died. It was not me losing control." Someone was pushing a button. Jace felt a surge of rage so hot it nearly blinded him. They were not just monitoring her. They were piloting her. They had turned a living woman into a remote-controlled disaster to keep her isolated, terrified, and obedient. "We have to copy this," Jace said, reaching for a data shard. "We need to get this to—" A chime echoed through the room, loud and jarring. The wall panel lit up with the royal seal. "Alert," the automated voice intoned. "Transport to the gala commences in 45 minutes. His Highness and Captain Rowan are requested at the lift." Jace slammed the console shut, hiding the evidence. He looked at Lyrae. She was shaking, the light on her skin flickering erratically. "We cannot go," she said, her voice rising in panic. "Jace, if they have remote triggers, they could do anything. I am a walking bomb." Jace grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face him. "Listen to me. If we do not go, they will know we are onto them. We have to play the game a little longer. We go to the gala. We smile. And while we are there, I will scan the room for the transmission source. If there is a trigger man, he has to be close." Lyrae looked into his eyes, searching for the strength she felt failing in herself. She nodded slowly. The Grand Gala was a spectacle of excess designed to make the galaxy forget it was on the brink of war. The ballroom was a massive sphere of transparency steel suspended in the upper atmosphere. Outside, real stars burned in the vacuum. Inside, holographic constellations swirled in the air, mimicking the night sky of the Sarathi homeworld. The floor was segmented into floating islands, each with its own gravity field. Dancers moved between them, leaping in slow motion, their gowns and uniforms rippling as gravity shifted and twisted. Jace stood at the edge of the central platform, feeling like he was wearing a straitjacket. His dress uniform was impeccable, but his eyes were constantly darting, scanning the crowd, checking exits, watching hands. Lyrae stood beside him. She was a vision of terrifying beauty. She wore a gown of liquid silver that clung to her like a second skin, leaving her arms and back bare to display the swirling, glowing patterns of her mark. To the onlookers, she was the cursed bride, a dangerous artifact on display. To Jace, she was the only real thing in the room. "Dance with me," she said quietly. Jace looked at her. "Is that wise?" "The censors. Everyone is watching," Lyrae said, her chin high. "If we stand apart, we look weak. If we dance, we look united. Besides, the rotation of the floor might help disrupt any signal locks." Jace offered his hand. "Then lead the way." "Princess, I have 2 left feet and they are both human." They stepped onto the central disc. The gravity here was lighter, about 0.8 standard. Jace felt a moment of weightlessness before his magnetic boots compensated. The music was a swelling orchestral piece that seemed to vibrate in the bone. Lyrae placed one hand on his shoulder, her touch firm and cool. Jace hesitated, then placed his hand on her waist, hovering respectfully. "Touch me." "Jace," she murmured, stepping closer. "You are my husband. It looks suspicious if you are afraid to hold me." "I am not afraid," Jace gritted out, closing the gap. His hand settled on the curve of her waist. The fabric was thin. He could feel the warmth of her skin, the hum of the energy beneath it. They began to move. It was a Sarathi court dance, a series of gliding steps and slow turns. Lyrae guided him, her pressure on his shoulder subtle but commanding. "Left," she whispered. "Now turn." Jace stumbled as the platform rotated, the gravity shifting vector. He nearly stepped on her gown. "Graceful," she teased, a small smile touching her lips. "You move like a cargo hauler in atmospheric turbulence." "I am a pilot," Jace shot back, tightening his grip to keep them upright. "I am used to G-force pushing me into a seat, not pulling me sideways. And for the record, your floor is spinning. It is supposed to spin. It mimics the orbit of the moons. It mimics nausea." Jace muttered. He looked down at her, in the swirling light of the holograms. Her eyes were vast and deep. For a moment, the mission, the data files, the war, it all faded. There was just the pressure of her hand, the scent of ozone and flowers, and the undeniable pull between them. They were orbiting each other, 2 lonely celestial bodies caught in a gravity well of their own making. "You are doing well," she whispered. "No one has died yet." "Give it a minute," Jace said. The night is young. The humor was a shield, but it was cracking. He wanted to pull her closer. He wanted to bury his face in the crook of her neck and forget that half the room wanted them dead. Then, the sky fell. It started with a sound like tearing metal. Above them, a section of the holographic star field peeled back. The transparency steel ceiling dissolved. "Incoming!" Jace roared. He did not think. He abandoned the dance. He grabbed Lyrae by the waist and threw himself backward, tackling her just as a rain of black objects struck the platform where they had been standing a second ago. Micro-drones, hundreds of them, hundreds of... They hit the floor and detonated, not with explosives, but with localized gravity spikes. The platform shattered. Jace and Lyrae tumbled off the edge of the floating disc. Security fields slammed into place around the ballroom, sealing the exits. But they were already falling. They crashed onto a service gantry 20 feet below, rolling to a stop in a tangle of limbs. "Move!" Jace shouted, hauling Lyrae to her feet. The drones were swarming above, buzzing like angry wasps. They were not spraying the crowd. They were targeting her. Jace dragged her toward a maintenance hatch. A drone dove at them, its nose tipping with a plasma cutter. Jace drew his concealed service pistol. He never went to a party without it, and fired. The shot took the drone in the intake, blowing it apart. They scrambled through the hatch and into the bowels of the station. The transition was jarring. One moment they were in a palace of light. The next, they were sprinting down a narrow, dimly lit service shaft that smelled of recycled air and hydraulic fluid. "They are tracking my energy signature," Lyrae gasped, hiking up her silver gown to run. "I cannot hide." "Then we do not hide," Jace said, checking the charge on his pistol. "We run faster." The air behind them shimmered, a distortion, like heat rising off asphalt. "Cloaking tech," Jace warned. "Assassins." 3 figures materialized from the shimmer, clad in sleek, shifting armor. They raised silence pistols. Jace shoved Lyrae behind a bulkhead and returned fire. His shots sparked harmlessly off their energy shields. "Their shields are too strong for kinetics," Jace yelled. Lyrae stepped out from cover. Her fear was gone, replaced by a cold, desperate focus. She raised her hands. The markings on her skin flared blindingly white. She did not fire a beam. She pushed a wave of raw probability disruption down the corridor. The assassin's shields flickered. The tech could not handle the chaotic data input of her symbiont. The cloaking field shorted out, leaving them visible and vulnerable. "Now!" Lyrae shouted. Jace leaned out and fired 3 precise shots. 2 assassins dropped. The third scrambled back, retreating into the shadows. Jace grabbed Lyrae's hand. The contact sent a jolt through him, but he ignored it. "Let us go. Down. We need to go down." They descended deeper, leaving the polished world of the elite far behind. The maintenance shafts gave way to the rusted support rings of the city's underbelly. Here, condensation dripped from overhead pipes, forming pools of glowing green algae on the grating. The hum of the city was a low, industrial thrum. They reached a dead end, a large circular chamber that housed a water filtration cycler. Jace scanned the room, weapon raised, clear. Lyrae collapsed against a rusted pipe, breathing hard. Her gown was torn, stained with grease. Her hair was wild. She looked magnificent. "We lost them," Jace said, holstering his gun, "but they will be sweeping the sector." A shadow detached itself from the gloom on the far side of the chamber. "You did not lose them," a voice rasped. "You just outran them." Jace spun around, hand on his weapon. "Easy, Captain," the voice said. A Sarathi elder stepped into the light. He wore tattered robes, but his bearing was noble. Behind him, 3 other figures emerged, humans and Sarathi, armed with scavenged tech, the dissidents. "I know you," Lyrae whispered, stepping forward. "You are Dr. Kalen. You were the head of the Science Directorate. You vanished 5 years ago." "I was erased," Kalen corrected, his eyes sad. "When I refused to continue the calibration of your cage." "Cage?" Jace asked. Kalen motioned to a makeshift table covered in data pads. "We have been watching you, Princess. We saw the data you pulled. You know about Prophet. I know they are controlling the accidents, Lyrae said, her voice trembling. I know I am a weapon. No, Kaelin said sharply. You are not a weapon. That is what they want you to believe. A weapon is a tool of destruction. You are a stabilizer. He tapped a display. The symbiont inside you is a quantum field entity. It affects probability, chance, luck. Left to itself, it seeks equilibrium. It wants to heal. It wants to fix broken systems. Jace frowned. Then why does everything around her break? Because they are forcing it to, Kaelin said. They installed subnetworks in the palace, on the ships. When you are near, they transmit a dissonant frequency that tortures the symbiont. It lashes out in pain, causing the surges. They have spent 20 years gaslighting you into thinking you are a monster, so that when they finally decide to blow up a planet, they can use you as the trigger and no one will question it. Lyrae sank to her knees. The revelation hit her harder than the drones. It is still me, she choked out, wrapping her arms around herself. It does not matter if they are pushing the buttons. It is my body. It is my energy that kills people. I am the gun. It does not matter who pulls the trigger if the gun is loaded. She looked up at Jace, tears streaming down her face. You should leave me. You should have left me at the altar. I am just a conduit for death. Jace looked at her. He saw the years of conditioning, the layers of self-hatred that had been carefully painted over her soul by people who claimed to love her. He dropped to his knees in the grime, right in front of her. He did not care about the audience. He did not care about the slime on his uniform. Stop it, Jace commanded softly. Lyrae shook her head, sobbing. It is true. I am cursed. I am a danger to you. You are not a danger to me, Jace said. You are the only reason I am still alive. Who took down the shields in the corridor? Who saved me at the wedding? That was survival. She wept. That was you, Jace said. He reached out and took her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away the tears that glowed faintly with her bioluminescence. Listen to me, Lyrae. When I first saw you, I was terrified. Not because of the curse, not because of the rumors. Lyrae froze, sniffing. Then why? Because, Jace said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. I took one look at you, stubborn, sharp-tongued, looking like you wanted to burn the whole world down. And I realized you were exactly my type. And that scared the hell out of me. Because I knew I would do anything to keep you safe. Lyrae stared at him. The silence in the damp chamber was absolute. Exactly your type? She whispered, a watery laugh bubbling up. You have terrible taste. Jace laughed too, a rough sound. I really do. He leaned in. He gave her a second to pull away. She did not. She surged forward. Their lips met. It was not a gentle, tentative kiss. It was a collision. It was the breaking of a dam. Years of loneliness and weeks of fear poured into it. Jace's hands tangled in her silver hair, pulling her closer. Lyrae clutched the lapels of his jacket as if he was the only solid thing in a dissolving universe. And the energy. Jace felt the hum begin. He felt the heat rise. He braced himself for the explosion, for the pain, for the alarms. But it did not come. Instead of a jagged spike, the energy around them smoothed out. The flickering light of the chamber stabilized. The hum became a harmony, a low, perfect resonance that vibrated in their chests. The symbiont was not lashing out. It was singing. They pulled apart, breathless, foreheads resting against each other. Jace opened his eyes. Lyrae was glowing, but it was not the harsh, blinding white of combat. It was a soft, steady gold, like the first light of dawn. It is not hurting you, Lyrae whispered, staring at her hands. The field. It is stable. Because you are not afraid, Kalen said from the shadows. His voice was filled with wonder. The symbiont reacts to emotional states. The dissonance signals prey on your fear and isolation. But the bond, the connection between you, it is overriding the signal. Jace looked at Lyrae. You are not a walking bomb, princess. You just needed a better pilot. Lyrae laughed, a sound of pure relief that transformed her face. A loud, exaggerated throat-clearing sound echoed from the corner. We are having a moment here, Jace said without turning around. We are having a revolution here, Captain, the dissident retorted, and we are on a schedule. Jace and Lyrae separated, though Jace kept his hand firmly in hers. They stood up, facing Kalen. We have something for you, Kalen said. He handed Jace a data shard. This is the proof, not just the old logs, but the current orders. Jace slotted the shard into his wrist comp. He scanned the file. His blood ran cold. They are moving up the timeline, Jace said. There is a transfer order. They are moving Lyrae to Research Station Omega-4. The human station? Lyrae asked. Jace nodded grimly. It is listed as a protective custody transfer. But the real objective is listed here. Projected catastrophic event. They plan to overload your symbiont using the station's main reactor. They are going to blow the station, Kalen said. And they are going to blame it on the cursed bride. It will kill 5,000 humans and destroy the Sarathi escort fleet. It will be the start of a war of extermination. When? Jace asked. Tonight, Kalen said. The escort ship is already docking at the lower hangar. They will be coming for you. Jace looked at Lyrae. We can run, he said. Kalen can hide us. We can disappear into the Undercity. Lyrae looked at the data shard. She looked at the glowing algae. She looked at the man who had just kissed her and proved she wasn't a monster. If we run, the war happens anyway, she said. If we run, they win. So what is the alternative? Jace asked, though he already knew the answer. Lyrae's eyes hardened. We let them take us. Jace grinned. That is a terrible plan. I love it. We hijack the transfer. Lyrae said. We get on that ship. We go to the station. And we use the reactor to broadcast the truth to the entire galaxy before they can blow it up. Kalen nodded. It is suicide. But it is the only chance we have. 20 minutes later. Jace and Lyrae stood at the designated extraction point near the lower hangar. They had surrendered to the royal guards who found them, playing the role of exhausted, frightened victims of the assassination attempt. A sleek, black military escort ship sat on the pad. The markings were human, but the crew was a mixed joint task force. Admiral Vance stood at the ramp. He looked relieved, but his eyes were cold. Thank God you are safe, Vance said. We are moving you to a secure location immediately. The palace is compromised. Of course, Admiral, Jace said, his voice flat. We are in your hands. He guided Lyrae up the ramp. As they passed the Admiral, Jace felt the weight of the concealed data shard in his boot. They were led to a private cabin. The door hissed shut and locked with a heavy magnetic thud. They were alone. The ship's engines rumbled to life, vibrating through the floor. Jace checked the room for bugs. He nodded to Lyrae. It was clean enough for whispers. Lyrae sat on the bunk, her silver dress ruined, her face smudged with grime, looking more royal than she ever had in the palace. We are really doing this, she whispered. Jace sat beside her. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. The gold light pulsed softly around their joined hands. We are, he said. Lyrae looked at him, her eyes dark with a mix of fear and a new, simmering heat. Jace, if we do not make it. We will make it, Jace promised. He leaned in, brushing his lips against her ear. Because now I know the secret, he whispered. What secret? You are not cursed, Jace said, pulling back to look at her. You are just high maintenance. Lyrae let out a shocked laugh and shoved his shoulder. Jace caught her hand and kissed the knuckles. The ship lurched as it detached from the city. They were in the void now. Just the two of them. A stolen secret, and a galaxy trying to kill them. Jace looked at her, and the look they shared was electric. It promised danger. It promised vengeance. And it promised that whatever happened in that cabin during the long flight to the station, the no-intimacy rule was about to be broken into 1,000,000 pieces. The military escort ship Void Runner cut through the subspace strata like a needle through black velvet. It was a sterile vessel, all gunmetal gray bulkheads and recycled air that tasted faintly of copper. But for Captain Jace Rowan and Princess Lyrae, it was the first place in weeks that did not feel like a stage. The security detail was heavy, stationed at every corridor junction, but inside their assigned quarters, the surveillance was surprisingly light. The conspirators, arrogant in their victory, assumed the broken princess and the soldier were too cowed to cause trouble. They were wrong. Inside the small utilitarian cabin, the air hummed with conspiracy. Jace had rigged a portable hollow emitter to display the stolen schematics of Research Station Omega-4. The blue wireframe of the station floated in the center of the room, rotating slowly. Here, Jace murmured, pointing to a ventilation shaft near the reactor core. This is a thermal exhaust port. If the schematics are right, it bypasses the main security grid. Lyrae leaned in closer, her shoulder brushing against his arm. She did not pull away. The heat of her skin seeped through the sleeve of his uniform, a distraction Jace fought to ignore. That shaft is too narrow for a human, Lyrae noted, her voice low. But the energy conduits running parallel to it, here. She traced a line with her finger, her hand passing through the hologram. These are plasma relays. If I can access the junction box here, I can feed a pulse into the grid. It would not shut down the security, but it would blind their internal sensors for 30 seconds. 30 seconds is an eternity if you know how to use it, Jace said, looking at her side profile. The bioluminescent markings on her neck were glowing a soft, steady indigo. She was focused, her mind sharp as a diamond. It was hard to reconcile this tactical planner with the terrified woman he had seen at the wedding. They spent hours like that, heads bent together over the map, their voices hushed. The enforced proximity was doing something dangerous. It was eroding the walls they had built, every time their fingers brushed while manipulating the map, every time their eyes met to confirm a detail. The air in the cabin grew tighter, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the ship's reactor, to burn off the tension. They retreated to the crew gym during the station's sleep cycle. It was a cramped, sweat-stained room with a few mats and gravity weights, smelling of antiseptic and effort. Jace stood in the center of the mat, stripping off his tunic to reveal a black undershirt. You have raw power, Lyrae, he said, circling her. I saw that blast you threw at the assassins, but in close quarters, power does not help if you cannot move. Lyrae watched him, her eyes tracking his movement. She wore a fitted training suit she had synthesized from the ship's fabricator. It left little to the imagination. So teach me, she said, raising her hands in an approximation of a guard stance. Jace stepped in. He gently pushed her elbows down. Too wide. You are exposing your ribs. Keep your guard tight. He moved behind her, his hands settling on her hips to adjust her stance. His touch was professional, firm, but the contact sent a jolt through both of them. He could feel the rigid muscles of her waist, the slight intake of her breath. "Center your gravity," Jace instructed, his voice rougher than he intended. "Humans are top-heavy. Sarathi are taller, lighter bones. You have to use your momentum." "Like this?" Lyrae asked. She spun. It was not a human move. It was a fluid, serpentine motion that defied the physics Jace was used to. Before he could react, she had hooked her leg behind his knee and used his own weight against him. Jace hit the mat with a solid thud. The wind knocked out of him. He blinked up at the ceiling lights. A second later, Lyrae's face appeared above him. She was grinning, a wicked, triumphant expression that made her markings flare bright teal. "Dead," she declared. Jace groaned, propping himself up on one elbow. "That was cheating. You used alien geometry or something." "I used momentum." "Captain," she teased, offering him a hand. He took it. Her grip was strong. She pulled him up, but he pulled a little too hard, or maybe she let herself be pulled. They collided, chest to chest, staggering to find their balance. For a heartbeat, they did not move. Jace's hands were on her arms. Her hands were on his chest. They were breathing hard, sweat cooling on their skin. The smell of her, ozone and wildflowers, filled his lungs. The banter died in his throat. He looked at her mouth. He saw her gaze drop to his lips. "Jace," she whispered, the words sounding like a question. The door hissed open. A guard poked his head in, looking bored. "Time check. 10 minutes to lockdown." They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. "Right," Jace said, turning away to grab a towel, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. 10 minutes. "We are leaving." Lyrae smoothed her hair, her markings flushing a deep, embarrassed violet. But as she walked past him to the door, she glanced back. The wicked smile was gone, replaced by something softer, something that terrified him far more than her combat skills. That night, sleep was impossible. The ship's hum felt too loud, the bunk felt too small. Jace woke from a light doze to find the other bunk empty. He sat up. Lyrae was standing by the viewport, wrapped in a thin thermal blanket. The blast shield was open, revealing the streaking psychedelic tunnel of hyperspace outside. The blue shift light washed over her, making her look ghostly. Her markings were dim, flickering in uneven, jagged patterns. Jace stood up quietly. He grabbed his own blanket and walked over to her. The floor was cold under his bare feet. He stopped just behind her, not touching, but close enough to shield her from the draft of the ventilation unit. "Nightmares?" he asked softly. Lyrae did not turn. "The labs," she murmured. "I dream about the table, the restraints, the scientists watching from behind the glass, taking notes while I screamed. They told me the pain was necessary, that I was doing it for the Empire." Jace felt a spike of anger in his chest, hot and sharp. He wanted to find every scientist who had ever touched her and introduce them to the vacuum of space. "I dream about the Battle of Orion," Jace said, offering his own ghosts in exchange. "We lost 6 ships in 3 minutes. I was the squadron leader. I gave the order to engage. I watched my friends burn because I made a call based on bad intel." Lyrae turned her head slightly, looking at his reflection in the heavy glass. "You blame yourself, every day," Jace said. "I have a survivor's guilt complex a mile wide. I figure the reason I cannot die is because the universe wants to punish me by making me watch everyone else go first." Lyrae turned fully around then. The blanket slipped off her shoulder. She shivered, but she did not pull it back up. "I always thought I was a weapon," she confessed, her voice trembling. "A thing, a dangerous object that had to be contained. Even when I looked in the mirror, I did not see a person. I saw a malfunction." Jace reached out. He took the edge of the blanket and pulled it back up over her shoulder. His knuckles grazed the sensitive skin of her neck. "You are not a malfunction." "Lee, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are brilliant. You are the sharpest person I have ever met. You are funny, in a terrifying, alien way, and you are so stubborn it makes my head hurt." Lee let out a wet laugh, sniffing. "You think I am stubborn? You punched a drone. It had it coming." Jace grinned. He looked down at her. The hyperspace light played across her face, catching the tears in her eyes. "You are not a weapon," Jace repeated, dropping his voice to a whisper. "You are just a woman who has been through hell. And for the record, you are beautiful." Lee froze. The compliment hung in the air between them, heavy and real. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. She found none. "You are not so bad yourself, human," she whispered, a shy smile touching her lips. "For a primitive with no sense of rhythm." Jace laughed softly. He stepped closer. The space between them vanished. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. A warning klaxon blared. The lights died, plunging the room into total darkness. The artificial gravity generator stuttered, leaving them weightless for a split second before slamming them back down. Lee stumbled, crying out. Jace reacted on instinct. He reached for her in the dark. His arms found her waist. Her hands grabbed his shoulders. They collided, hard. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing the cabin in a dim, red glow. Jace held her tight, his heart racing. "You okay?" "I am fine." Lee gasped, her breath warm against his neck. "Just..." shook. She did not pull away. They were pressed together, hip to hip, chest to chest. The fear of the malfunction faded instantly, replaced by a different kind of adrenaline, a raw, consuming heat. Jace looked down at her. Lee looked up. Her eyes were wide, dark pools reflecting the red emergency light. Her markings were glowing, not with fear, but with a slow, rhythmic pulse that matched the beating of his own heart. "We should." Jace started, but he forgot what he was going to say. "To hell with the protocol," Lee whispered. She reached up, tangling her fingers in the hair at the nape of his neck, and pulled his head down. Jace met her halfway. The kiss was not tentative. It was a collision of worlds. It was hungry and desperate, a release of weeks of fear and anger and longing. Jace groaned low in his throat, his arms tightening around her, lifting her slightly off the deck. Lee wrapped her legs around his waist, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving universe. The energy field, the curse, the symbiont, the monster, flared to life. Jace felt it wash over him. It was not a shock. It was a wave of warmth, a hum that vibrated in his teeth and bones. Then it felt like standing in the center of a sun that had decided not to burn him. He carried her to the narrow bunk, never breaking the kiss. They fell onto the mattress in a tangle of limbs. The blanket was discarded. The uniforms were barriers to be removed. It was a frantic, clumsy, beautiful unraveling. There were no cameras here, no admirals, no councils, just a man and a woman who had found each other in the crossfire. When skin touched skin, the bioluminescence spread. It flowed from Lee onto Jace, tracing glowing patterns across his chest and arms, marking him as hers. The symbiont did not lash out. It did not explode the lights or short the gravity. It stabilized. The room filled with a soft, steady golden light, casting long shadows on the walls. It was a protective field, a cocoon of probability that whispered safe, safe, safe. Jace kissed the hollow of her throat, feeling the hum of the energy beneath her skin. "You are glowing," he murmured against her skin. "You are burning," Lee whispered back, arching into him. They crossed the boundary. They broke the taboo, and the universe did not end. It just got a whole lot quieter. Hours later, or maybe minutes. They lay tangled together under the thermal blanket. The red emergency lights had been replaced by the normal shipboard cycle, but neither of them moved to get up. Lyrae rested her head on Jace's chest, her fingers idly tracing the scar on his shoulder. The bioluminescence had faded to a contented glimmer, soft as candlelight. Jace stared at the ceiling, a stupid grin plastered on his face. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "that happened." Lyrae chuckled, the vibration rumbling against his ribs. "It did. I did not die," Jace noted. "No," Lyrae agreed. "You seem very much alive, and the ship did not explode. Also true." Jace turned his head to kiss the top of her head. So much for the curse. Lyrae propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Her hair was a silver mess, her lips swollen, her eyes bright. "It was never a curse," she said softly. "It was just lonely. The symbiont needed a connection. It needed a stabilizer." "You mean it needed me?" Jace asked, smirking. "Do not let it go to your head." Lyrae rolled her eyes, but she leaned down to peck him on the lips. "It needed someone stubborn enough to ignore the warning labels." Jace wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back down. "Well, I am good at ignoring orders." They lay there for a moment, listening to the hum of the engines. It was the first time in Jace's life he felt completely at peace. It was the first time in Lyrae's life she felt completely safe. "We have to get up," Lyrae whispered eventually. "We arrive at the station in 4 hours. 5 more minutes." Jace groaned, burying his face in her hair. Let the galaxy wait. By the time the morning cycle began, the shift in the air was palpable. They moved around the small cabin with a new, fluid synchronicity. When Jace buttoned his tunic, Lyrae reached out absently to straighten his collar, her fingers lingering for a second on his neck. When Lyrae sat to braid her hair, Jace walked by and brushed a stray strand of silver from her face, his thumb grazing her cheek. Small gestures, tiny claims of ownership. They knew they had to hide it. If the guards saw this, the softness in Jace's eyes, the lack of tension in Lyrae's shoulders, they would know the experiment had failed. They would know the curse was gone. "Okay. Masks on," Jace said as he prepped the door release. "You are the icy princess. I am the disgruntled soldier." Lyrae took a breath. Her expression hardened. Her posture stiffened. She looked at him with cool detachment. "You are breathing too loudly." "Captain," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Jace grinned. "That is the spirit." He opened the door. The guards were waiting. "We are approaching the station perimeter." The lead guard barked. "The Admiral wants you on the bridge for the approach." Jace nodded. "Lead the way." As they walked down the corridor, Jace kept his distance, but he could feel Lyrae's presence like a gravitational pull. He knew, without looking, exactly where she was. They reached the bridge, but instead of entering, Jace pulled Lyrae into a small auxiliary comms alcove just outside the main doors. "What are you doing?" Lyrae hissed. "Checking the weather," Jace muttered. He plugged his wrist comp into the maintenance port. He had written a sleeper program back in the cabin to sniff out local traffic on the secure bands. The display flickered, a data packet unspooled. It was a transmission from the station to the escort ship. Priority 1 encryption. Jace cracked it in 10 seconds. He was motivated. The audio file played, crackling with static. "Subject is secure. Transfer is on schedule. Admiral Vance, confirm payload status." Vance's voice replied, smooth and cold. "Affirmative. The reactor overload sequence is prepped. Once the girl is connected, we will initiate the surge. The feedback loop will be catastrophic. Estimated casualties. Total station loss. The Sarathi fleet in Sector 9 will be caught in the blast radius. Another voice cut in. High Priest Vailan, the narrative is set. The cursed bride's instability caused a resonance failure. A tragic accident. The Sarathi people will demand vengeance for her death. The war will be total. Jace froze. The blood drained from his face. They are not just going to kill us, he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. They are going to use your death to start a genocide. Lyrae stared at the screen. Her hand flew to her mouth. Valen. He was my spiritual mentor. He taught me to meditate. He held my hand when the experiments hurt too much, and he was planning to blow you up the whole time. Jace snarled. He punched the bulkhead, denting the metal. I am going to kill him. I am going to rip that station apart and— Jace! Lyrae grabbed his arm. Her grip was iron. Stop. Think. Jace looked at her. He was breathing hard, his eyes wild. They are going to murder 5,000 people. Lyrae. I know, she said, her voice calm but terrifyingly cold. And if we fight them now, if we run, they will just detonate the station anyway and blame us. They will say we sabotaged it. So what? Jace asked. We turn ourselves in? Lyrae looked at the schematic on the screen. She looked at the reactor core. I can turn myself in, she said softly. If I surrender. If I let them hook me up. Maybe I can contain the blast. Maybe I can hold it in long enough for the evacuation. No, Jace said immediately. Absolutely not, Jace. It is logical. 1 life for 5,000. I do not care about the math. Jace grabbed her shoulders, pulling her close, ignoring the risk of being seen. You are not a sacrifice. Lyrae, you are not a component in a machine. I am not letting you die to clean up their mess. Lyrae looked up at him. She saw the fierce, unyielding protection in his eyes. She saw the love he hadn't said out loud yet, but was shouting with every action. Then what do we do? She asked. We cannot stop the sequence. It is already locked in. We do not stop it, Jace said, a dangerous idea forming in his mind. We hijack it. Hijack a reactor meltdown? Exactly. We stick to the plan. We let them take us to the core. We let them plug you in. Lyrae's eyes widened. You want me to connect to the grid? I want you to connect, Jace said. But while they are initiating the overload, I am going to be in the engineering sub-levels. I am going to rewrite the safety protocols instead of a feedback loop. We create a broadcast antenna. A broadcast antenna? You said the symbiont affects probability, Jace said, grinning sharply. It affects data, signals. We use the reactor's power to boost your field. We do not blow up the station. We blow up their cover. We broadcast everything, the files, the logs, this conversation to every screen in the sector. Lyrae stared at him. It was insane. It was risky. It relied on her ability to control a star's worth of energy while being tortured by it. Can you do it? Jace asked. Can you hold the energy? Lyrae thought about the gym. She thought about the night before. She thought about the golden light that had filled the cabin. If you are there, she said. If you are with me, I can hold anything. I will be there, Jace promised. The ship shuddered again. The deceleration thrusters fired. Jace and Lyrae stepped out of the alcove and moved to the main viewport on the bridge. Research Station Omega-4 hung in the void like a steel halo. It was massive, a ring of industrial metal silhouetted against a violent, stormy nebula of purple and black gas. Static lightning arc across the station's hull. It looked like a tomb. But as Jace stood next to Lyrae, He reached down and took her hand. He didn't care who saw. He interlaced their fingers, squeezing tight. Lyrae squeezed back. Her markings flared a steady, defiant gold. "Ready?" Jace asked. Lyrae looked at the station, then at him. "Let us go make some noise, husband." They walked toward the airlock, hand in hand, ready to burn the whole conspiracy to the ground. Research Station Omega-4 smelled of antiseptic and ozone. It was a smell Jace Rowan associated with field hospitals and morgues, a scent designed to mask the copper tang of blood and the sour reek of fear. As the airlock of the escort ship hissed open, a squad of station security personnel in pristine white armor stood waiting. They were not the ceremonial guards of the Sarathi Palace, nor were they the battle-hardened Marines of the fleet. These were corporate soldiers, their gear faceless and sterile, their weapons held at a relaxed but ready low guard. Subject secure, the lead guard spoke into his helmet comms, not acknowledging Jace or Lyrae directly. Transporting payload to Containment Ring Alpha. Payload? Jace felt the muscle in his jaw jump. He tightened his grip on Lyrae's hand, but a guard stepped forward, placing a heavy armored hand on Jace's chest to separate them. Protocol requires separation for decontamination and prep, the guard stated flatly. Jace did not move. He looked the guard in the visor. "Touch her, and you will be eating your meals through a straw for the next 6 months. The guard hesitated, sensing the coiled violence in the captain. "It is all right." "Jace," Lyrae said softly. Her voice was steady, though Jace could feel the tremor in her fingers before she let go. "They are just following their programming." She looked at the scientists waiting behind the guards, men and women in lab coats holding data pads, looking at her with hungry, clinical eyes. They did not see a princess. They did not see a woman. They saw a battery, a biological curiosity to be dissected and drained. One scientist, a tall human woman with severe glasses, stepped forward. She did not look Lyrae in the eye. Instead, she scanned the bioluminescent markings on Lyrae's neck with a handheld device. "Luminescence is at 40%, the scientist muttered to her colleague. "Optimal resonance requires at least 80. We will need to induce stress to spike the output before insertion." Jace stepped in front of the scanner, blocking her view. "She is a person," he snarled, "not a lab rat. Talk to her, not about her." The scientist blinked, looking at Jace as if a piece of furniture had suddenly started shouting. "Captain Rowan, your presence here is a courtesy. Do not interfere with the asset calibration." Jace wanted to draw his pistol. He wanted to burn this entire white-walled hellscape to the ground. But he felt a phantom vibration against the bone of his mastoid process. The stolen comm implant he and Lyrae had surgically adhered behind their ears during the flight. "Easy." "Captain," the voice of Kalen, the dissident scientist, whispered through the bone conduction. "We need you inside the engineering ring. If you start a firefight now, the mission fails." Jace forced himself to exhale. He stepped back, his eyes burning holes into the lead scientist. "Lead the way," he said, his voice like grinding stones. They were escorted to a briefing room that looked more like an observation deck. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the central reactor core of the station. It was a terrifying sight, a massive swirling vortex of contained fusion energy, held in place by magnetic rings the size of city blocks. The light from the plasma threw harsh, dancing shadows against the white walls. A holographic projector in the center of the table hummed to life. 2 figures shimmered into existence. Admiral Vance sat behind his desk on the flagship, looking every inch the concerned grandfather. Beside him, projected from the Sarathi capital, stood High Priest Valen, his robes shimmering with digital light. "Captain." "Princess," Vance said, his voice warm and sickeningly sincere. "I am glad you arrived safely. We were worried the dissidents might try to intercept you." "We are safe, Admiral," Jace said, keeping his face impassive, "though the welcome wagon is a little cold." "Precautions, Captain," Valen intoned, his clouded eyes fixed on Lyrae. "The station is a delicate environment. We must ensure that the princess's condition does not threaten the facility." Lyrae stood tall, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked at the man who had been her spiritual teacher, the man who had comforted her while plotting her death. "I am ready to do my part. High Priest," she said, "if this procedure will stabilize the curse, I surrender to it." "Brave child." Valen smiled. "The great cycle demands sacrifice. You are the vessel of our peace." Jace felt bile rise in his throat. It was a masterclass in manipulation. They were congratulating her on walking into her own execution. "This transfer is for the greater good," Vance added, leaning forward. "Once the symbiont is neutralized, the threat of war will vanish. You are heroes, both of you." Jace tapped his finger against his thigh, a rhythmic pattern. 1, 2, 1. It was a signal to the implant. "Receiving," Kalen's voice whispered. "The data drop is cued. We just need the broadcast antenna. Get to engineering." Jace looked at the hologram. "Thank you, Admiral, and we just want this to be over." "It will be over soon," Vance promised. The preparation chamber was a nightmare of nostalgia for Lyrae. It was identical to the labs of her childhood, the same stark lighting, the same smell of cold metal and ozone, the same restraining tables. She sat on the edge of a diagnostic bed while technicians fitted her with the interface harness. It was a heavy, intricate lattice of silver cables and conductive nodes that locked onto her spine, her wrists, and her temples. Every time the cold metal clicked into place against her skin, she flinched. Flashbacks assaulted her, the needle sliding into her neck, her father watching from behind the glass. The burning sensation of the symbiont being forced to expand. She started to hyperventilate. The markings on her skin flared jagged and bright, a strobe light of panic. "Subject is destabilizing," a technician called out, heart rate 140, neural feedback spiking. Jace pushed past the security guard. "Back off," he ordered. He walked up to Lyrae. He did not touch the equipment. He stepped between her knees, blocking her view of the technicians, of the room, of everything but him. "Hey," he said softly. "Eyes on me." Lyrae looked up. Her pupils were blown wide, swallowing the nebula colors of her irises. "Jace, I cannot." "It is just like before." "It is not like before," Jace said firmly, "because I was not there before. I am here now." He took her face in his hands, ignoring the technician who reached out to stop him. Jace shot the man a glare that promised murder, and the hand retreated. "Look at me," Jace commanded gently. "You are Lyrae. You drive me crazy because you steal all the blankets. You have a terrible laugh. You are the strongest person in this galaxy. This is just hardware. It is just metal. It does not own you." Lyrae blinked, focusing on the scar on his chin. "The blankets?" she whispered, her voice shaky. "You steal them," Jace insisted, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. "And you have cold feet. It is a tactical hazard." Lyrae let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. The jagged flashing of her skin smoothed out into a rapid but steady pulse. "I am okay," she whispered. "I am okay." Jace leaned his forehead against hers. "You are going to be great. You are going to light this place up. Just remember the plan." "I remember," she said. A senior technician cleared his throat. "Captain, we need to move the subject to the core." Jace pulled back. He looked at Lyra one last time, pouring every ounce of his belief into her. Showtime. Princess. The walk to the reactor core required them to pass through a service junction, for a brief moment, as the technicians argued about the transport manifest with a door guard. Jace and Lyra were left in a narrow maintenance corridor. The hum of the station was deafening here, vibrating through the floor plates. Jace grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her into the shadows between two humming bulkheads. He did not speak. He just kissed her. It was fierce, frantic, and tasted of desperation. It was the kind of kiss two people share when they are standing on the edge of a cliff and the ground is crumbling. Lyra's hands, encumbered by the heavy interface gauntlets, clutched at his jacket. Jace's arms wrapped around her, pulling her so close he could feel the hard lines of the harness pressing into his chest. It was not gentle. It was a promise. It was a plea. "Come back to me," Jace whispered against her lips. "Do not you dare let go. I will find you," Lyra promised, her voice breaking. Through the noise, "I will find you." The door at the end of the corridor hissed. "Move it," a guard shouted. They broke apart. Jace smoothed her hair back, his eyes dark and fierce. Lyra straightened her spine, the fear gone, replaced by a cold, burning determination. "Go," she said. Jace turned and walked away, heading toward the engineering lift. He did not look back. If he looked back, he would not be able to leave. The engineering ring was a chaotic labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and shouting engineers. Jace moved through the crowd with the arrogance of a high-ranking officer. He tapped his wrist comp, flashing a falsified high-clearance authorization code that Kalen had uploaded. "Inspection," Jace barked at a junior engineer who tried to stop him. "The Admiral wants a manual verify on the fail-safes before initiation. Move!" The engineer scrambled out of the way. Jace found a remote terminal tucked behind a cooling tower. He jacked his wrist comp into the port. His fingers flew across the holographic keys. Accessing main reactor control. Encryption level 5. Bypassing. "Come on," Jace muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. On the screen, the schematics of the reactor lit up. He could see the command sequences being loaded by the conspirators. They were nasty. Feedback loop alpha. Safety inhibitors. Disabled. Target output. 300%. "They really want to make a big bang," Jace whispered. He began to type, burying his own code deep inside the station's root directory. He was not trying to stop the overload, he was trying to reshape it. He wrote a subroutine that would catch the energy spike and reroute it into the station's communications array. Error. Biometric override required. "Damn it," Jace cursed. He pulled a knife from his boot. He sliced his thumb, pressing the bloody digit against the scanner while simultaneously keying in his military ID. Identity confirmed. Subroutine lighthouse active. It was done. He had tied the sabotage to his own heartbeat. If he died, the code would fragment. Initiation in 2 minutes, the station speakers announced. Jace pulled his interface cord and ran. He needed to be closer. The reactor core chamber was a cathedral of energy. Lyra hung suspended in the center of the room, held aloft by gravity fields. The heavy cables connected to her harness stretched out like the webs of a metallic spider, plugging into the walls of the chamber. Below her, the fusion reaction swirled, a blinding river of white and violet plasma. She felt small. She felt terrified. The voice of the lead scientist crackled in her ear. Connection established, symbiont integration at 90%, initiating stimulus, Pain. It hit her like a physical blow. A surge of electricity shot through the cables, designed to irritate the symbiont, to make it lash out. Lyrae screamed, her back arching against the restraints. Her skin exploded with light. The markings did not just glow, they burned. Energy output rising, the scientist observed coldly. Subject is responding. Increase voltage, more pain. The symbiont inside her writhed, a caged animal being poked with a spear. It wanted to destroy. It wanted to tear the station apart to stop the pain. Lyrae felt the urge to let go, to let the chaos take over, to shatter the magnetic containment rings and let the fire consume them all. Do it, a dark voice in her head whispered. They deserve it. She saw the faces of the men who had died because of her. She saw the ships burning. I am a monster, she thought. I am death in the engineering ring. Chaos erupted. Jace's code slammed into the conspirators' commands like a freight train. Warning! Primary containment breach! A computer voice shrieked. Energy flow rerouted. Sparks showered down from the ceiling as a conduit blew. The engineers were shouting, running back and forth. What is happening? The chief engineer yelled. I cannot control the flow. It is diverting to the comms array. Security! Find the source! Someone screamed. Jace was crouching behind a control bank, watching the chaos. He checked his implant. Lyrae, he whispered. Hold on. A squad of guards rounded the corner, spotting him. There. Jace didn't wait. He grabbed a heavy wrench from the workbench and threw it into the exposed gears of a cooling turbine. The machine shrieked and seized, spewing steam into the corridor. Under the cover of the steam, Jace moved. He tackled the lead guard, driving his shoulder into the man's solar plexus. He wasn't fighting for territory. He was fighting for time. Lyrae was drowning in fire. The symbiont was screaming. Lyrae. The voice cut through the static. It was not the scientists. It was not the dark whisper of her trauma. It was Jace. I am here. His voice echoed through the implant, and deeper, through the bond that tethered their souls. I am right here. Lyrae opened her eyes. The plasma below her was roaring. They want you to break. Jace's voice was strained, breathless, as if he was fighting. Do not break. Bend. Lyrae gasped, forcing air into her lungs. She remembered the feeling in the cabin, the warmth, the golden light. The way he looked at her, not with fear, but with awe. She was not a monster. She was his partner. She stopped fighting the symbiont. She stopped trying to push the pain away on instead. She opened herself to it. She accepted the energy pouring into her. Come here. She mentally reached out, grabbing the thread of connection to Jace. She pulled. She pulled his stubbornness. She pulled his survivor's guilt. She pulled his love. The symbiont paused. It felt the connection. It felt the stability of another presence. The screaming stopped. In the control room, the readings on the screens went impossible. Sir, the energy spike. It is gone. What? Admiral Vance roared, slamming his hand on the desk. It is smoothing out. Look at the waveform. On the main viewer, the jagged, violent red lines of the reactor output suddenly snapped into a perfect, harmonious sine wave. It was a golden arc of pure stability. Inside the core, the violet plasma changed color. It turned a brilliant, blinding gold. The light did not explode outward. It cascaded. It flowed over Lyrae like a waterfall, washing away the pain, washing away the fear. The cables attached to her harness stopped pulsing with angry red light and began to glow with a gentle white luminance. Lyrae hung in the center of the storm, eyes closed, a look of transcendent peace on her face. She was not containing the energy. She was conducting it, Broadcast active, Kalen's voice announced. Every screen on the station flickered. Every screen in the Sarathi fleet nearby flickered. Every news feed in the sector flickered. The image of Admiral Vance appeared. It was the recording from the morning. The reactor overload sequence is prepped. The feedback loop will be catastrophic. Total station loss. Then High Priest Valen's face appeared. The narrative is set. The cursed bride's instability caused a resonance failure. The war will be total. Then the logs scrolled. Project Prophet. The childhood experiments. The remote triggers. The sabotage orders. It played on the bridge of the flagship. It played on the wrist comps of the soldiers. It played on the public squares of the Sarathi capital. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. On the bridge, Admiral Vance stood frozen, staring at his own face on the screen, confessing to genocide. "Cut the feed!" he screamed, his face turning purple. "Cut it now! We cannot, sir! It is being powered by the reactor itself. The signal strength is off the charts." Vance looked at the station on the tactical display. He saw his career, his life, and his war crumbling to dust. "If I go down," he whispered, his eyes mad, "I am taking them with me. Override the safety," he ordered calmly. Manual meltdown. "Detonate the core." "Sir," the tactical officer hesitated, "that will kill us all. Do it." Vance drew his sidearm and shot the officer in the shoulder. "Do it now!" The terrified crew scrambled to obey. The command was sent. Jace heard the klaxon change. It wasn't the alert siren anymore. It was the evacuation alarm. Core meltdown imminent. T-minus 60 seconds. No. Jace breathed. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye. His left arm hung uselessly at his side, dislocated during the fight with the guards. He was surrounded by unconscious bodies and wrecked machinery. He looked at the heavy blast door leading to the reactor core. It was sealing shut. Jace roared. He grabbed a discarded plasma rifle from the floor. He didn't have two hands to aim, so he jammed the barrel against the door mechanism and pulled the trigger. The lock melted. The door groaned. Jace threw his shoulder against the hot metal. He pushed. He strained until he felt blood vessels pop in his eyes. The door gave way inches. 30 seconds. Jace squeezed through the gap. He stumbled into the antechamber. Guards were swarming the catwalks. They were not trying to arrest Lyrae anymore. They were setting up heavy repeaters. "Target the subject." The security chief yelled, "Cut the cables! Drop her into the core!" Jace raised the plasma rifle with his good arm. He fired blindly, suppressing the guards on the upper walkway. "Lyrae!" he screamed. Inside the field of golden light, Lyrae opened her eyes. She looked down. She saw him, bloodied, broken, standing alone against an army. She smiled. The guards fired. Energy bolts slammed into the golden field around her. They didn't penetrate. They were absorbed, adding fuel to the fire. 10 seconds. Jace dropped the rifle. It was empty. He pulled his knife. He started to run toward the control platform, limping heavily. "Shut her down!" the chief screamed. "Kill her!" Jace reached the platform. He looked up at Lyrae, suspended in her storm of light. She looked like an angel of judgment. Her eyes were glowing so bright he couldn't see the pupils. Her body was outlined in burning radiance. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a goddess. And the station was about to die around her. Jace laughed, a breathless, hysterical sound. "Exactly my type," he whispered. The countdown hit 0. The world turned white. The countdown timer on the overhead display flashed 0. But the universe did not end. Instead, the laws of physics inside the reactor core chamber seemed to bend, stretching time until it became a thick, viscous substance. The blinding white light that had swallowed the room did not bring heat or disintegration. It brought silence. Captain Jace Rowan stood at the edge of the control platform, his arm hanging uselessly at his side, blood dripping from a cut above his eye into his lashes. He squinted against the radiance. In the center of the chamber, suspended within the swirling heart of the fusion reaction, Princess Lyrae was no longer just a woman. She was a conduit. The heavy industrial cables connected to her harness were not feeding power into her anymore. They were vibrating with the sheer magnitude of the energy flowing out of her. The symbiont, that ancient quantum entity she had carried like a curse since childhood, had fully awakened. It was wild, terrifying, and magnificent. Normally, this much energy in a biological system meant instant vaporization. But Lyrae was not vaporizing. She was glowing with a brilliance that made the fusion plasma look dim. The containment field rippled. Arcs of wild electricity lashed out, striking the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The guards who had been firing at her moments ago were scrambling back, terrified by the storm they had provoked. Jace took a step forward. Warning. The automated system droned, its voice distorted by the magnetic interference. Biohazard. Lethal radiation levels detected. Shut up, Jace muttered. He stepped off the platform and onto the narrow maintenance gantry that led to the center of the core. The metal groaned under his boots. The air tasted of metal and static. Jace! Lyrae's voice did not come from her mouth. It resonated directly in his skull, amplified by the comm implant and the psychic bond that had been forged between them. Go back. I cannot hold it. Jace ignored her. He kept walking. The air around him crackled. A tendril of violet plasma whipped toward him, moving like a striking cobra. Jace did not flinch. He did not try to dodge. The energy struck his chest, but it did not burn. It did not kill. It splashed against him like warm water, wrapping around his torso and sliding away. The symbiont recognized him. It knew his heartbeat. It knew the taste of his fear and the stubborn, ironclad shape of his love. He reached the center of the ring. Lyrae hung just above him, her eyes wide pools of pure light, her hair floating in the anti-gravity field like a halo of silver fire. She looked down at him with a mixture of terror and awe. You are insane, she projected, her thought trembling. I am invested, Jace shouted over the roar of the reactor. He reached up. The distance was too great. He stepped onto the railing of the gantry, balancing precariously with his one good arm, and stretched his hand toward hers. Take my hand, Lyrae. She hesitated. If she touched him, the circuit would close. The power of a dying star would flow through him. Trust me, Jace roared. Lyrae reached down. Their fingertips brushed. Snap! The sound was louder than a cannon shot. The entire station shuddered. Jace felt the universe rush into him. It was not pain. It was a sensation of absolute, overwhelming vastness. He felt the cold of deep space, the heat of a supernova, and the lonely, quiet crying of a child in a laboratory. He felt Lyrae's trauma, her fear, and the immense crushing weight she had carried for 20 years. And then he pushed back. He poured his own stability into the connection. He gave her his grounding, his soldier's discipline, his refusal to break under pressure. We guide it, Jace thought, the words forming in their shared mindscape. We do not fight it. We steer it. Lyrae gasped, her physical body arching. Together. They turned their will toward the reactor. The meltdown sequence was a runaway train, a jagged spike of chaotic data and heat. Jace and Lyrae caught that train. On the screens in the control room, the jagged red line of the energy output hit the ceiling of the graph, and then, impossibly, it flattened. The violet plasma in the chamber shifted color. It softened. It turned a deep, rich emerald, then a tranquil azure, and finally settled into a soft, pulsating gold. The violent thrashing of the magnetic rings ceased. The screaming alarm died. The energy did not vanish. It bloomed. It expanded outward from Lyrae and Jace, passing through the walls of the reactor, through the hull of the station, and out into the void. Outside, the Sarathi fleet and the human escort ship saw a miracle. The station did not explode. Instead, a massive shimmering aurora borealis erupted from the engineering ring. It was a wave of coherent light that washed over the ships, harmless and beautiful, painting the dark nebula in shades of gold and starlight. Inside the chamber, the hum dropped to a low, steady purr. The countdown display flickered, glitched, and froze at 000. System override, the computer announced, sounding confused. Core stability at 100%. Meltdown averted. Jace looked up at Lyrae. The blinding light faded from her eyes, returning them to their deep, nebula swirl violet. She slowly lowered toward him as the gravity fields reset. She landed lightly on the gantry. Her legs gave out instantly. Jace caught her with his good arm, wincing as his dislocated shoulder protested, but he did not let go. She collapsed against his chest, burying her face in his torn uniform, sobbing not from sorrow but from the sheer, overwhelming relief of being alive. "We did it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "We did not blow up. I told you," Jace panted, resting his chin on the top of her head. "I am very hard to kill." High above in the command center, the silence was absolute. The crew stared at the main view screen, where the golden aurora was fading into the black. Admiral Vance stood by the tactical console, his face a mask of ash. His hand was still gripping his sidearm, but the barrel was pointing at the floor. "It is a trick," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It is a Sarathi trick. She is manipulating the sensors." "Sir," the comms officer said, her voice trembling, "the broadcast, it is still running." Vance looked at the side screens. The Prophet files were cycling on a loop. His own voice, recorded weeks ago, was playing over the speakers. Total station loss, necessary sacrifice. The doors to the bridge hissed open. Vance spun around, raising his weapon. It was not Jace Rowan. It was his own security detail. The men and women who had watched the broadcast, who had seen the data, who realized they had been moments away from being vaporized by their own commander. "Put it down." "Admiral," the security chief said, his rifle leveled at Vance's chest. Vance laughed, a brittle, manic sound. "You do not understand. The peace is a lie. The Sarathi are monsters. That girl is a nuclear weapon waiting to go off. I was trying to save humanity." "You were trying to start a war," the chief said coldly. "And you were going to kill 5,000 of your own crew to do it. Stand down." Vance looked at the crew. He saw disgust in their eyes. He saw the end of his career, his legacy, his power. "I did what was necessary," Vance spat. "History will vindicate me." He raised the gun, not at the guards, but toward the viewport, as if to shoot the station itself. The security chief fired once. A stun bolt took Vance in the chest. The admiral crumpled to the deck, his weapon skittering away. Simultaneously, across the galaxy on the Sarathi capital world, a similar scene was unfolding. High Priest Valen stood on the balcony of the sacred spire, watching the live feed from the station. The golden light of Lyrae's triumph was reflected in the crystal city below. He turned to his acolytes, raising his staff. "Cut the feed. Tell the people it is a human fabrication. Activate the sleeper cells." The acolytes did not move. One of them, a young novice who had once looked at Lyrae with fear, stepped forward. "The data is clear." "High Priest," the novice said, "you poisoned the princess. You lied to the Empire." Valen sneered. "I protected the faith. You corrupted it," the novice said. The High Priest tried to invoke a command code, a failsafe to purge the temple's data banks. But his staff remained dark. The acolytes had locked him out. "Guardians!" the novice called out. "Remove him!" As Valen was dragged away, screaming curses about the void, the people in the streets below were not looking at the temple. They were looking at the screens, watching the cursed bride hold a sun in her hands and refuse to let it burn them. In the reactor chamber, the adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by a crushing exhaustion. Jace sat on the metal grating of the gantry, his back against the railing. Lyrae sat between his legs, leaning back against his chest. The harness lay discarded nearby, a pile of dead metal. Medical teams were rushing in, their boots clanging on the walkway, but they stopped a few feet away, hesitant to approach the couple who glowed with faint, residual energy. Jace waved them over with his good hand. "We are fine," he rasped. "Well, my shoulder is out and I think I broke a rib, but she is fine." Lyrae reached up and touched his face. Her fingers were cool. The bioluminescence on her skin had dimmed to a gentle, rhythmic pulse, soft as a heartbeat. "You saved me," she whispered. Jace shook his head. "No, you saved everyone. I just gave you a jump start." He looked at the scientists and soldiers gathering around them. The look in their eyes had changed. There was no clinical detachment anymore. There was no sneering superiority. There was fear, yes, but also respect. And something else, gratitude. "They tried to make you a villain," Jace said, loud enough for the room to hear. "But you make a terrible villain, Princess. You are too busy being a hero." Lyrae closed her eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. For the first time in her life, she did not feel the cold bite of the symbiont waiting to hurt her. She felt whole. The weeks that followed were a blur of political chaos and reconstruction. The revelation of Project Prophet shattered the fragile status quo of the galaxy. The human coalition government collapsed in a vote of no confidence. The Sarathi Imperial Council was purged of hardliners. The Joint Tribunal was held on neutral ground, a massive orbital station between the two borders. The entire galaxy tuned in. Lyrae testified for 3 days. She did not wear a veil. She did not hide her markings. She wore a simple white suit, standing tall and articulate as she detailed 20 years of torture, manipulation, and lies. She spoke not as a victim, but as a witness. When she finished, the room was silent. Then it was Jace's turn. He walked to the podium in his dress blues, his arm in a sling. He looked at the judges, human and alien alike. "I was ordered to marry a monster," Jace said, his voice amplified across the stars. "I was told she was a curse. I was told she was the enemy." He looked at Lyrae, sitting in the front row. She met his gaze, her expression steady. "The only enemies in this room," Jace continued, turning to point at the dock where Vance and Valen sat in energy cuffs, "are the men who use fear to control us. They turned a child into a weapon because they were too cowardly to make peace." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "I resigned my commission this morning," Jace announced, "because I will not serve a system that treats people like parts. I serve my wife, and I serve the truth." The applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar. It was not polite diplomatic applause. It was the sound of a galaxy waking up. The reforms came swiftly. New laws were passed banning bioweaponization of sentient beings. Oversight councils were established, staffed by scientists and ethicists from both species. It wasn't a perfect fix. Politics never was, but it was a start. Lyrae refused to retreat into a quiet life. She used her newfound fame to advocate for other survivors of the Prophet program and similar Black Ops projects. She became a symbol, not of fear, but of resilience. But amidst the whirlwind of advocacy and legal battles, there was still the matter of the marriage. It happened a month after the tribunal. Jace and Lyrae took a shuttle to the surface of Xylos, the ocean planet. They found a quiet observation deck on one of the floating cities far away from the palace, overlooking the endless glowing sea. It was dusk. The twin moons were rising. Jace leaned against the railing, watching the waves. He was out of uniform, wearing civilian clothes that fit him loosely. He looked younger, the weight of the war finally lifting from his shoulders. "So," he said, "the council says the bond is technically voidable, since it was entered under false pretenses and duress." Lyrae stood beside him. She wore a dress of soft blue that matched the ocean. "Technically," she agreed. "We could annul it tomorrow. You could go back to Earth. You could buy a farm, or whatever it is retired human heroes do." Jace laughed. "I would be terrible at farming. I would probably try to fix the tractor and end up building a tank." "Probably." Lyrae smiled. She turned to face him. The wind caught her silver hair. "I do not want an annulment, Jace," she said quietly. Jace turned to her. "Good, because I was not going to sign the papers anyway." He took her hands. "The first time we did this," Jace said, "we were surrounded by people who wanted us to fail. We promised to serve empires that lied to us." Lyrae nodded. "Let us do it again, properly." Jace cleared his throat. He looked her in the eye, his expression serious but his eyes warm. "I, Jace Rowan, take you, Lyrae, to be my partner, not my assignment, not my mission, my partner. I promise to fix things when they break, to cover your back in a firefight, and to never ever let you think you are a monster." Lyrae's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed his hands, her markings glowing with a soft, happy gold. "I, Lyrae, take you, Jace Rowan, to be my anchor. I promise to trust you with my life, to share my strength with you, and to tolerate your terrible taste in music." "Hey," Jace protested weakly, and Lyrae added, stepping closer. "I promise that no matter where the galaxy tries to push us, I will always choose you." She leaned up and kissed him. It was soft, sweet, and sealed with the quiet hum of the symbiont wrapping around them like a blanket. There were no explosions, no saboteurs, just the sound of the ocean and the beating of two hearts that had finally found their rhythm. Domestic life, as it turned out, was harder than saving the galaxy. The kitchen of their new apartment on Xylos was a disaster zone. Smoke, purple and smelling of sulfur, billowed from the oven. Jace coughed, waving a towel. "I thought you said the blue root was edible." "It is edible," Lyrae shouted from the living room, laughing. "If you peel it first, the skin is reactive to heat. You could have mentioned that before I put it in the fusion broiler," Jace yelled back, dumping the smoking tray into the sink. He walked into the living room, covered in soot. Lyrae was curled up on the couch, scrolling through a data pad. She looked up and burst into laughter. "You look like you fought a plasma vent and lost," she said. "I am never cooking alien vegetables again," Jace grumbled, wiping his face and leaving a streak of ash. "From now on, it is protein packs and synthesized pizza." Lyrae patted the spot next to her. "Come here, Chef Disaster. Look at this." Jace sat down, putting his arm around her. "What is it? More hate mail from the hardliners?" "No." Lyrae grinned. "Fan mail. Look. This one is from a Sarathi teenager in the Outer Rim. She says she dyed her hair silver because she wants to be like the uncursed princess. And this one is for you." She handed him the pad. It was a message from a human veteran. "Captain Rowan, I lost my leg in the war. I hated the Sarathi for 10 years. Watching you stand by her, watching you fight for her, it made me rethink things. Maybe we are not so different. Thank you. Jace stared at the screen. He felt a lump in his throat. We are making a difference, he said softly. We are. Lyrae agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. That evening, they sat on the balcony. The city lights drifted below them. Lyrae sat in Jace's lap, her back to his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. It was intimate, quiet, and profound. The symbiont pulsed gently, reacting to their closeness. It wasn't a separate entity anymore. It was part of their language. When Jace kissed the sensitive spot behind her ear, the light brightened to a warm coral. When Lyrae leaned back and sighed, it faded to a contented teal. They exchanged slow, lazy kisses between bursts of laughter about the day's headlines. You know, Jace murmured, nipping at her shoulder, for a woman who can power a starship, you are surprisingly cuddly. I am conserving energy, Lyrae teased, turning to kiss him properly. For later. Jace raised an eyebrow. Is that a threat, Princess? It is a probability. Captain? 6 months later, the spaceport was busy. Jace and Lyrae walked down the concourse, flanked by a small team of aides and scientists. They were not dressed in royal finery or military armor. They wore practical field gear, matching gray flight suits with the patch of their new initiative, the Horizon Foundation. They were heading to the Galactic Rim. There were rumors of an illegal research facility there, another remnant of the old regime. They were going to investigate. They were going to shut it down. As they approached their ship, a refurbished Corvette that Jace had personally modified, a young cadet from the flight academy ran up to them. He was human, barely 20, holding a data pad for an autograph. Captain, Princess, the cadet stammered. It is an honor. Jace signed the pad. Lyrae smiled at the boy, her presence radiant and assured. Good luck out there, sir, the cadet said, looking at Jace with wide eyes. Can I ask, do you ever regret it? Regret what? Jace asked. Being, you know, forced. The arranged marriage, it must have been terrible. Jace stopped. He looked at the ship. He looked at the galaxy of stars waiting above them. Then he looked at Lyrae. She was checking the pre-flight manifest, her silver hair tied back, her profile sharp and beautiful. She sensed his gaze and looked up. She didn't say anything. She just raised an eyebrow and smirked, a look that said, Are you coming, slowpoke? The symbiont hummed in his mind, a warm golden thread connecting them. Jace looked back at the cadet. His eyes crinkled at the corners, soft and a little wicked. They forced me to marry the cursed alien princess, Jace said, his voice full of laughter. He glanced back at Lyrae, who rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the flush of pleased pink light that rippled across her cheeks. But in the end, Jace finished, clapping the cadet on the shoulder. She turned out to be exactly my type. He turned and jogged up the ramp. Lyrae was waiting for him at the airlock. She grabbed his jacket and pulled him inside. You tell that story to everyone, she whispered as the door hissed shut. Only the ones who need to hear it, Jace said. He sat in the pilot's chair. Lyrae sat in the co-pilot's seat. She powered up the engines. The ship hummed to life. Ready? She asked. Always, Jace said. He punched the throttle. The ship blasted off into the sky, leaving the gravity of the past behind, headed for the open stars, together.